Members of council to chamber for quorum. Where's Michael? I don't know. There he is. Okay, see, I waited. Here he is. Hey, Vince is here, we can start. Good morning, everyone. I see we have a quorum. I now call this meeting to order. And just before we get started, to my colleagues, we have an evening meeting session tonight at 7 p.m. to consider the following items. Final report, 70 Dixfield Drive, and request for zoning, directions report, 240 Markland Drive. So, anybody not going to be here tonight? So there's 3. All right. So we're tight for quorum. So who's not going to be here? Councilor Giorgio, Palazzo, Nunziata? Well, we don't have quorum.
No quorum. I'm a maybe, but...
No, we need to have quorum.
I gave my regrets 2 weeks ago.
Good.
Yeah, mine was attached to Nunziata.
So who's not going to be here tonight? DeGiorgio, Palazzo, Nunziata, DeChano? Not going to be here. DeChano and Mamalidi.
3.
So we have Doucette, Crisanti, Grimes, Holiday, and Campbell. Is it quorum?
You're here.
No.
Mr. Chair, that, if you allow me for a second. Councilor DeGiorgio and myself, we have a DA meeting that's been set up almost 2 months ago.
Well, we need to,
Otherwise
we don't have quorum.
we'll try to be here.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll just put my kids in the basement and tie them up to, I don't know, maybe the stairs or something, and I'll try and make it.
Throw a loaf of bread down there too. Why don't you just bring them?
I'll bring 3 kids under 6 inside this room.
Okay, so one more time. Okay, one more time. Who will be here? Councilor Doucette will be here. Councilor Giorgio? Councilor Crisanti, Councilor Grimes, Councilor Holiday, Councilor Campbell. So we need one more person.
Okay, so me and Frank will talk after the meeting.
Okay.
Me and Frank will talk.
Okay, are there any declarations of interest at this time? Mr. Cresswell?
Yes, thank you, Chair Grimes.
Guys.
I have to declare a conflict on item 31-6. That's a property that's immediately adjacent to the property that my wife and I own, so when that comes up, I will exit.
Duly noted. And I have one also, Rosemary. I'm sorry, what's the number? It's on my sheet. 31.19, heavy truck prohibition on Lambton Avenue. I want to declare a conflict. I own a transportation company, so I'll call a conflict on that one. I'll now take a motion to confirm the minutes from May 2nd, 2018. Moved by Councilor DeChano. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any petitions at this time? Seeing none? Yeah, just before we go through the items, as you look at your reports, they're written a little bit differently. I'd like to ask Neil to kind of give us a brief explanation of the new look that we have on our sheets and explain these preliminary reports. And Neil, go ahead and floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Grimes. Yes, so to the members of the Etobicoke York Community Council, you will notice that the planning reports on this agenda and subsequent agendas have quite a different look to them. This is in response to the provincial legislation under Bill 139. Do I need this closer?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Move all the stuff here. So once again, this is in excuse me. This is in response to the changes that the provincial legislation under Bill 139, the recent changes to the Planning Act. There was actually a report that was before City Council, was approved on May 22nd, PG 29.2. If Council wants to get a fulsome detail on that, that report was there. In particular, there's an appendix, an attachment at the back that provides a communication from the province about the specific changes that were made to the Planning Act. But in regard to the planning reports that you see before you today, the essential change is that the provincial legislation now requires every City Council decision to be consistent with the PPS and conform with the growth plan. That is now the first test of planning in the province of Ontario. So what you will see in all of the staff reports that is now an emphasis on those matters in addition to the other matters that you typically deal with. So for example, just pulling out one of the reports, say 31.2, the final report on the Islington Avenue application, for example, pages 4 and 5 of that staff report refer to decisions of City Council having to be consistent with the PPS, and it has a breakdown about the PPS policies. If you turn to page 6 of that same document, it talks about the conformity to the growth plan. And then what you will see throughout all of the staff reports, in this case it's a recommendation report on a final, the staff opinion on page 12 addresses the conformity and consistency issues, and then there's a conclusion in the back of it on page 20 which also addresses that the staff opinion that is consistent with the PPS and doesn't conflict with the growth plan. So that's what you will now see going forward in our final reports. For example, the request for direction reports, like 31.7, where we may have some issues with an application, again, you will see conversations about consistency and conformity. In particular, when we get there, you can turn to pages 23 and 25 of that report, speaks specifically to where we believe there are issues with the consistency and conformity question. And in particular, the preliminary reports are substantively different. What you will see, particularly in reports 31.9, 31.10, and 31.11, is we now have 5 recommendations. We previously had 3 recommendations about community consultation. We now have 5 recommendations. The reason we now have 5 recommendations is that we are concerned about the council break that is about to be upon us for the election, and the ability of applicants to file appeals on the basis of council's lack of decision. The new legislation, which if you go to an appeal process now, it does not rely on oral testimony, but it relies on the public record in front of City Council. That is the main basis. This is a very substantive change in the way we do our business, and in fact it provides more authority to the municipality, which is what the City of Toronto asked for, so it's a fairly large sea change, but it's a good sea change. But where we find ourselves right now is we're in the middle of shuffling out where that process goes to and how it gets resolved. So out of an abundance of caution, what you will now see in our, what formerly were called preliminary reports now, are called request for interim direction. And for example, if you turn to 31.9 and look at the 5 recommendations, they used to say Community Council directs staff to do the following. They now say City Council directs staff to do the following. So these reports will not stay here at Community Council. They will go forward to City Council. In the event that there is an appeal of Council's lack of decision, there will now be a formal record of what City Council's opinion of the application are, even on an interim basis. Again, it's out of an abundance of caution right now, and there are going to be appeals, there are going to be tests at the municipal board under the new regime, and until all of that stuff rumbles itself out, this is the response we've decided is the most appropriate course of action. So the preliminary reports that you are used to seeing, you will not see. You will see what they are called requests for interim direction reports. The recommendations will say, in their current format, we have these following challenges, direct us to continue to work out those challenges, and then to undertake the public consultation as per the usual recommendations. So those are the largest changes that you will see in the short term. Again, a lot of this will be worked out during the council recess for the election about a longer term solution, but these are the responses that you will see. The other thing that I will let Community Council know is, because of the changing of the legislation and the reporting timelines and what the local planning and appeal tribunal will now adjudicate on, is you are going to see a significant increase in applications on the next agenda from community planning. Again, we have a substantive number of appeals that came in under the old regime, which we have to address fairly quickly. We also have a substantive number of new applications that, out of an abundance of caution, we will want to take reports forward to council on. We are triaging the literally hundreds of applications that we need to address, and you will see a rush of applications on the next Community Council agenda. I would also suggest you will see a rush of walk-on applications at the next 2 council meetings, not only from Etobicoke York planning staff, but from city planning staff collectively. Again, we're trying to address a brand-new system. We'll take a couple of years to shuffle it out to get to a point where we're happy with it, we're consistent, we know what we need to do, but in the interim, these are the changes that you will see. So, thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you, Neil. Any questions? Seeing none. So, as Neil said, next meeting is gonna be pretty heavy, so we can make sure we do not have any nighttime meetings. This could go into the night, so please don't book any, nighttime meetings for the next council meeting, if all possible, because we're gonna have a pretty heavy agenda. Okay, we'll now go through the items. 31.1, final report, 70 Dixfield Drive. That's the meeting tonight. We have speakers. 31.2, final report, 1124, 1128, and 1130 Islington Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. We have speakers at 10 o'clock. 31.3, final report, 1736 Weston Road, zoning bylaw amendment application. We have speakers at 10 o'clock. 31.4, final report, High Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Character Study. We have speakers at 10:15. 31.5, status report, Bloor West Village Avenue Study, speakers at 10:15. 31.6, request for direction report, 3005 Bloor Street West and 14 Humbervale Boulevard, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. We have speakers at 10:45. 31.7, request for direction report, 3429 Bloor Street West, official plan and amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application, speakers at 10:45. The other item for tonight, 31.8, request for direction report, 240 Markland Drive, zoning bylaw amendment application. We have speakers. That's for tonight. 31.9, request for interim direction report, 1800 to 1818 St. Clair Avenue West, 383, 425 Old Western Road, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. Councillor Palacio.
I'm going to hold the item. I had a
Hold.
couple of questions to city staff. Thank you.
3110, request for interim direct report, 2346, 2352 Weston Road, zoning bylaw amendment application. Councillor Nunziata.
Sorry. So I have a motion, see if the staff has that.
Everything's held, everything's, your speaker's on, is it?
Is it on the screen? Oh, okay.
Oh, it's not working.
Okay.
Okay. There it is.
So that's what I'm moving,
Can you read it off, please? We're just expanding the area, okay.
just expanding the area,
Okay,
one
so,
by the applicant.
Councillor Nunziata, moving this draft recommendations with moving the, expand the area to 240 meters. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3111, request for interim direct report 17, 25, and 75 Vickers Road, zoning bylaw amendment and removal of the H. Councillor DeChano.
Adopt staff recommendations, Mr. Chair.
Councillor DeChano moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3112, front yard parking appeal, 102 Mountain View Avenue of speakers. 3113, front yard parking appeal, 104 Mountain View Avenue. We have speakers. 3114, front yard parking appeal, 392 Lauder Avenue. We have speakers. 3115, front yard parking appeal, 184 Rousemount Avenue. We have speakers. 3116, application for fence exemption, 23 Bradley Avenue. We have speakers. 3117, application for fence exemption, 854 Weston Road. We have speakers. 3118, application for fence exemption, 18 Riverly Drive. We have speakers. 3119, heavy truck prohibition. I will take a walk, hand the chair to Deputy Mayor Holliday.
You gonna move it for him?
No, it's mine,
What's yours?
yeah.
All right, 3119, heavy truck prohibition, Lambton Avenue. Councillor Nunziata?
Yes, I'll move the recommendation.
Move the staff, I'm just gonna get a recorded vote to make sure. All those in favor? Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crescenti, Councillor Holiday, Councillor DeCiano, Councillor Mamalidi, and Councillor Campbell. Thank you. That passes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. 3120, traffic control signals, Annette Street and Quebec Avenue. Councillor Doucette.
I'll be moving staff recommendations.
Councillor Doucette moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3121, proposed traffic control signals, Rogers Road and Chambers Avenue. Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move the recommendations from city staff.
Councillor Palacio moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3122, stop control, the Carriage Court and Feller Road. Councillor Campbell.
Just gonna move receipt of the report, Mr. Chair.
Yay! So moving receipt instead of the staff recommendations, right? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3123, always stop control, Morrison Street, 4th Street, and Morrison Street and 9th Street. That's in my ward. I will hold that down. 3124, speed limit amendment, Silverstone Drive. And Councillor Councillor Crescenti, sorry.
That's right, yeah. So I'll, Mr. Chair, I'll move staff recommendations.
Councillor Crescenti's moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3125, parking alteration and parking amendment, Thoroughdale Avenue. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Move staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor DeGiorgio moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3126, traffic calming Rosemount Avenue between Dufferin Street and Greenlaw Avenue. Councillor Palacio.
Please hold.
Hold.
Yes.
3127, parking regulation amendment on Hearst Circle. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Move staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3128, parking regulation amendment, Quebec Avenue. Councillor Doucette.
I'll be moving staff recommendations.
Move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3129, parking regulation amendment, Westtown Subdivision. Councillor Mamalidi.
I'm gonna move staff recommendation.
Councillor Mamalidi, move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3130, school bus loading zone, parking regulation amendments, Pine Street, McDonald Avenue. Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, I'll move the staff
Moving
recommendations.
the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3131, accessible loading zone, High Park Avenue. Councillor Doucette.
Moving staff recommendations.
Move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3132, installation and removal of on-street accessible parking spaces, Public York District, May 2018, delegated in wards 13 and 17. Councillor Palacio.
We are good moving the staff's recommendations.
I want to give you a chance to move something.
Very
All
good.
in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3133, proposed amendments to Chapter 918, parking on residential front yards and boulevards for the areas of former City of York in Ward 12. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Move staff recommendation.
Move staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3134, implementation of permit parking on Silverthorne Avenue between Cameron Avenue and the north side of Silverthorne Avenue. Councillor DeGiorgio. Move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3135, designation of fire routes and amendment to Chapter 880, fire routes 91 to 97 Arrow Road. Councillor Mamalidi.
Move staff recommendations.
Move the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3136, designation of fire routes and amendment to Chapter 880, fire routes 600 Rogers Road. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Move staff recommendation.
Staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3137, designation of fire routes and amendment to Chapter 880, fire routes 150 Sims Road. Councillor Nunziata.
Move the staff recommendation.
Move the staff recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3138, Emery Village First Nations Park Hydro 1 negotiation update. Councillor Mamalidi.
Mr. Chairman, I've been working with staff on this, and there is a motion that I'm about to move. But before we do that, I'd like you to hear from staff, because they do, support this, and I think you need to hear.
So we're gonna hold it down. We're gonna hold
No,
it.
don't hold it down, it'll take 2 seconds, it really will. It really will. No, I just need you to hear that they support the project, because it's, their recommendation is receipt, but they do support the project.
Nick?
We support the project. All right, we support the motion that the council votes put forward.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Mamalidi, move your motion.
All right, the reason can we turn on his mic, please? I didn't hear it.
Councilmember Lee, can you move your motion?
I just need them to say it in the mic, that they support the project.
Councilor,
They're
we support-
recommending receipt. I called the clerk's office yesterday, and receipt means do nothing, okay? So I just needed everyone to hear that they do
Okay.
support the project, and now I'm gonna move this motion.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
We
Go ahead,
support the
Councilor Emily.
project and the motion being brought forward by the council.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Nick.
Councilmember Lee?
So I'm gonna move that, Etobicoke York Community Council requests the city manager, Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, in consultation with officials from the Transportation Services and Hydro One, to report to Etobicoke York Community Council for its meeting on July the 4th, 2018, with final recommendations related to the First Nations Park to be located within the hydro right-of-way in the Emery Village.
All in favor?
Recorded
Opposed?
vote, recorded
All in
vote.
favor? Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Doucette, Councilor Palacio, Councilor Nunziata, Councilor Crescenti, Councilor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holliday, Councilor DeChano, Councilor Mamalidi, Councilor Campbell. That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Campbell. 3139, update on request to strengthen tree protection enforcement in Long Branch. I'm gonna hold that. We also have speakers at 11:30. Proposed official naming of future park at 40 Cavern Street. Councilor DeChano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion put up on the screen, and it's just a slight change to the name. The recommendation states to name the park, Marion Maloney Park, and I'm asking that Etobicoke York Community Council officially name the future park located at 40 Caven Street, Senator Marion Maloney Park.
Great lady.
Great lady, and if I can have a recorded vote on that.
Absolutely. All in favor of Senator Marion Maloney Park? Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Doucette, Councilor Palacio, Councilor Nunziata, Councilor Crescenti, Councilor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holliday, Councilor DeChano, Councilor Mamalidi, Councilor Campbell. That carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Councilor DeChano. Well deserved. 31.41, request for approval of temporary signage permits for community events at Franklin Horner Community Center. Councilor Crescenti, can you move that on my behalf, please?
41?
Yep.
Yep, happy to do that. So I'll move staff recommendations on behalf of, Councilor Grimes,
Councilor
or
Crescenti moves
41.
staff recommendation. All in favor, opposed, carried. Same with 42, Councilor Crescenti.
And the
31.42,
same
request
for
for approval of temporary signage permit for community event, 15th Annual Lakeshore Mardi Gras. Councilor Crescenti.
Move staff recommendations on behalf of Councilor Grimes.
Councilor Crescenti moves the staff recommendations. All in favor, opposed, carried. 31.43, appoints the Business Improvement Area Boards of Management, Wards 5 and 11. Councilor Nunziata.
Yes, I'll move it.
Move the staff recommendations. All in favor, opposed, carried. 31.44, nominations for appointment to the Board of Management, Swansea Town Hall Community Center. Councilor Nunziata. Councilor Doucette.
I'll be moving staff recommendation, and I would like to thank the board of the Swansea Town Hall for all the work they do, and welcome the new members.
Councilor Doucette moves the staff recommendations and thanks the board. At Swansea, all in favor, opposed, carried. 31.45, Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario Manufacturers Limited Liquor Sales License Application, High Park Brewery, 839 Runnymede Road.
Okay, I'll move
Councilor
it.
Nunziata.
And everybody's invited.
Everybody? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 31.46, endorsement of events for liquor licensing purposes in wards 5, 6, 11, 13, 17. Councilor DeChano.
Move staff recommendations.
Councilor DeChano with the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. New business, 31.47 to 31.54. I need a motion to add these to the agenda. Moved by Councilor DeGiorgio. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, moving right along. First item,
Mr. Chair,
point of order, Councilor Doucette.
sorry, before we actually approve the order of the agenda, I'd like to request that for the 10:15 items, which is the final report.
What's the numbers, I'm sorry, page and number?
Sorry, EY 31.4 and EY 31.5, they're both at 10:15. I'd just like to reverse the order, because a lot of what happens in the Bloor West Avenue study will also pertain to the character study of Hyde Park.
We'll do 5 before 4.
Please and thank you.
Okay, we're in reverse
And
through
also-
31.4 and 35. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And also, can I ask just for a very short presentation from staff so people understand what these reports are before us? Very short.
Very short.
Very short.
Mr. Cresswell, very short.
They heard.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Our first item, 31.12, front yard parking appeal, 102 Mountain View Avenue. We have a couple speakers. Sandra Tao? Sandra? We've already done that. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes, thank you.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Tsai, and I'll be speaking also on behalf of my husband, Taras Coolish. We are both residents and owners of the property 102 Mount View. And due to the location of our house across the street from the school, we are unable to park on our side of the street, and also there is limited evening and weekend parking only on the other side of Mount View Avenue. So our 4 houses have to park across the corner on Glen Lake, along with the residing residents on Glen Lake. We had put in an application for front yard parking in 2017, and this was originally rejected due to 3 reasons. The main reason being a large tree that was sited on the property adjacent to us at 60 Mount View. This tree has subsequently been cut down by the city in February of this year. Another tree was sited, and this actually is a small lilac bush which can be easily removed. The third siting was a soft landscaping, which is the only outstanding issue. In light of the circumstances and the fact that the 2 issues are no longer issues, we would request that this appeal be allowed and an exemption to soft landscaping requirements should be granted. We anticipate that with this, there's the increasing parking demand will get worse with the new developments that's going to be discussed in further agenda items subsequent to ours. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, question.
So you said that you have trouble parking, but there are quite a few parking permits that are available on the street that are unused.
Not on our street. We have to park around the corner at Glen Lake, and there are 10 parking spaces, which 4 of them are taken by the Mount View side, and then we also have to compete with community members who use the community center, which is adjacent to it, as well as Lithuania Park, and as well as parents picking up their students from the Keogh Public School. So quite often, when I return after school, there's no parking, and I have to drive around a few times before I can find parking.
Was this a state of affairs you were aware of when you bought the house?
Not really.
Not really?
No.
So you bought the house thinking you could just park in front of your house?
It wasn't an issue then because I was working 9 to 5 and I was getting home after hours. But now with the scheduling issue, it's become an issue.
How long have you lived in the house?
For 16 years.
For 16 years?
Yes.
So this parking problem is new?
No, it's been ongoing, and we anticipate that it will get further with the new developments that are going to occur. There's, I believe, that are going to occur in the Hyde Park area.
So with your proposal, you would put a driveway where there's presently a parking spot on the street, correct?
No, there's no parking on that side of the street allowed.
I'm just looking at the house.
Yes.
And there's the stairs coming down.
Mm-hmm.
And so in front of your house, there's no parking allowed.
No.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you're proposing to cut out your entire front lawn and put in a driveway?
Yes.
Okay, just to be clear, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. Just for the record, folks, at the back there, my clocks aren't working here. My timing clocks aren't working, so I'll be timing it here unless you can do something at the back there. Thank you.
Staff.
Our next speaker, Taras Kulich. Taras? Not here? Any other further speakers to the end before we bring it into the committee?
I got questions of staff.
Oh, you didn't ask me questions.
Hold on, wait. Sorry? Hello? Any other further speakers to the end before we bring it to the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Questions of staff, Councillor DeChano?
I have questions.
Councillor Campbell, questions of staff.
Questions of staff?
Okay, let's get staff to the floor here.
Hello. Hi. So there's no parking on the side of the street where they want to take out the sidewalk and pave over the front.
Correct.
Why is there no parking on that side of the street?
It's not an on-street parking situation.
Why is that?
It's, on-street wasn't, requested on that block.
Is there, could there be on-street parking there?
If the residents want it, they have to petition for ballots.
So that would be, that's a possible solution
Yes.
to carving out, parking pads, just to have, so on the other side of the street, there is parking, but on this side, there is no parking.
That's correct.
And there's room for parking on both sides of the street?
No, there's no on-street,
No, there's no, but there's room for parking on both sides of the street.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's this application, but it probably speaks to all of them. I know that we changed the soft landscaping requirements recently at council. Does this report reflect the latest public policy on the issue, or is it the old landscaping requirements?
This is the old landscaping requirement.
Okay. Do we know, is it on the public or the private side that the landscaping requirements were not met?
It's on the city boulevard.
It's on the city boulevard?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so would, with the new policies approved at council, if this application came back, would it meet our policies or not? Since this report's based on our old policies.
Actually, the new policy is a little bit more restrictive.
Restrictive, okay. Thank you.
Blocked today, I don't know. I can't feel my feet. Can we get the air conditioning maybe turned down a little bit? I can't feel my feet.
It's
Yes.
misty in here.
Okay, all right. Oh, no heat, just turn the air conditioning down. Counselor Doucette, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I will be moving the alternate recommendations on this. These owners put their application in a while ago when we were still looking at the old process. As they say, there was a tree there which would have therefore meant that I would not be able to support this application. But the city took the tree down because it was unhealthy, poor health, and it has already been removed. There is no parking on this side of a street. There's a school on the other side of a street. And I would say that if you have parking on both sides, you may have trouble getting school bus through, but I'm not transportation. So as I say, this is why I will be supporting on this one the alternate recommendation, because the city has removed the tree, which you know is usually one of my priorities, and they're not taking a parking spot off the street, which is another of my priorities. So thank you.
Any further speakers to the item? Counselor Duchano.
I'm very happy to see that the local council are supporting the ultimate recommendations.
Local.
Yeah, I'm happy that the local council are supporting the alternate recommendations, and I will be following suit as well, so thank you.
No, it's not. Okay, 31.13, front yard parking appeal, 104 Mountain View Avenue. Lynn Duncan, Ms. Duncan? Oh, sorry, it's Lyle Duncan, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Duncan. Good morning, welcome, sorry.
My name is Lyle Duncan, I'm speaking on behalf of myself.
Mr. Duncan, you pull that mic up just a little bit, my friend, please?
How's that?
There you go, thank you.
Okay. We applied for front yard parking, around the same time as our neighbor at 102, and in the spring, and we've lived at this residence for about 30 years. And the four houses at the north end of our street, we all applied for front yard parking around the same time. Two of them were approved. My neighbors at 102 and ourselves were not approved, and one of the ones that had approved is our neighbor that we share a driveway with. We have a mutual driveway and we share it with them. So, and the reason we applied now is because, with the new developments that are going on in the High Park, with all those new, rental towers that are going in, the apartment buildings, there's gonna be, towers of 39, 34, 33, and 29 stories going up, which will add approximately 1,800 new rental units to the area, and effectively doubling the population in the area. So the demand for the on-street parking, will increase and will most likely exceed the available permits that are remaining. And as it is, and as our house is directly across the street from the school, there is no parking on the street during the week. We can park there in the evenings and at night, but during the daytime during the week, we cannot park out there, even in the summertime when the school is out. So we have to park around the corner on Mount View or anywhere in the area where we can find suitable parking. So, and as well with the park, the Lithuania Park at the end of the street, it's scheduled for new developments for playground and water play improvements to be scheduled to start in September. This will probably increase the usage of the park, and with that and the community center across the street, when there's any events there or whatever, people drive their kids to the park, and there's a lot of non-permit parkers on the street, on the Glen Lake, and as well on Mount View in the evenings and that, so sometimes we have trouble finding a spot on the street in front of our house on the other side or around the corner, and we've in certain times had to go a couple of blocks away to find parking and drive around until we could find something. And whenever there's a major event like the cherry blossoms in High Park, no way there's park on our street. We can't even find parking during the day, on the weekends, anytime there. So anytime there's that or some events that close the lakeshore, cars come up and they park on our street. Even though we are north of Bloor, they still come up there and they're parked in there, and we still have to drive around to find spots. And actually, when we've been parked around the corner on Glen Lake, our car has been vandalized a couple of times. We've had our car keyed, we've had our driver's side mirror broken off the car, and just last summer we had our license plate stolen off our car, that's not to say that couldn't happen if we're parked in our on-site parking, but we feel that would be less likely to happen if it's on our own property than if it's parked around the corner. And our application was not approved apparently due to the soft landscaping, open space landscaping, and issues with the city tree that's on our front property, on our front lawn. And we are requesting exemption, and we're willing to pay to have that city tree removed, as was one of the suggestions when we filed the appeal, and we're willing to pay to have that tree removed, and also to pay to have a tree planted elsewhere, as was also mentioned in the appeal, that we could do that as well. So we believe if the tree is removed, that the issues regarding the rest of it will be resolved. Because we have a mutual driveway, the entire front lawn would not be taken up with the parking. I think that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Mr. Duncan? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Doucette.
Forestry.
No.
Wow.
No, they're not here.
It's a tree.
Okay, I can't make the staff be here, they're not here. Sorry, Councillor. No.
Can I ask a question of staff for this parking pad? So this parking pad is being denied. One of the main reasons is because of the big tree there, and from the design, this parking pad would really almost touch the trunk of the tree. Has anyone looked to see the health of this tree?
We have a comment from Forestry saying that they do not support this application.
They do not support this application because of the tree.
That's correct.
Does it say if they've studied the tree to see if it's healthy or not?
No, there's no studies. It's just a comment saying
Okay.
they do not support it.
All right, thank you very much.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Doucette to speak.
So I will be supporting the staff recommendation on this one because there is a big tree there. If this tree was not healthy or in poor condition, I am sure that forestry, like the neighbours, would have come and removed this tree when they saw an application coming through. I do understand this is a busy street. I do appreciate that. But this parking pad, as I say, would kill this tree, and I can't support that. So thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor DeGiorgio?
Mr. Chairman, I will not be supporting the application as to deny the parking pad. There's a trade-off here that I think on balance the trade-off should be to allow the parking pad to go in, and there is a loss of a tree there, but there are many other trees that can be planted. This is that age-old debate that we have about whether we will allow the tree to come down, and to save the tree we end up sacrificing a lot of other amenities that are necessary in a particular neighborhood. So for those reasons I will not be supporting the recommendation.
Okay, so, sorry, Councillor Doucette, what are you moving, I'm sorry?
Staff rec.
Staff recommendations? Councillor Doucette's moving the staff recommendations, all in favor? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay. 3114, front yard parking appeal, 392 Lauder Avenue. Are there any speakers on Lauder Avenue? Lauder Avenue, any speakers? Seeing none, questions of staff. Sorry, Councillor Palacio. We'll have to hold it down. I'm gonna hold this down. Councillor Palacio's not here. He's not here for 15. Councillor Palacio, here he comes. Okay, so we're on 14, front yard parking appeal. I asked for speakers. There's no speakers. 392 Lauder Avenue. Have you questions of staff? No questions of staff. The floor is yours.
Chairman, I'd like to move the alternate recommendations.
Councillor Palacio's moving the ultimate recommendations.
I got a question to move it.
Question the mover?
The report says that there's a two-car garage. Do we know how many cars the applicant has?
I have checked that property. I've been there. They do have the owner of the property is physically handicapped, and literally she has to be taken in a wheelchair. And the proposed parking space has been in existence for years. So every time that she has a doctor, a nurse coming to see them, they cannot just go around the corner on Rogers where you have a tremendous amount of traffic. Even though this section will not be part of Ward 17 anymore, but in terms of doing the right thing, that's the right thing, Councillor Holiday.
The ultimate submission being moved. They're on the screen. All in favor? All in favor? Councillor DeChano? Opposed? That carries. Front yard parking appeal, 184 Rosemount Avenue. Are there any speakers on Rosemount Avenue? Rosemount Avenue? Let's call Rosemount Avenue. Bring in a committee. Questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm moving the alternate recommendations as well.
Councillor Palacio moving the ultimate recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
31-2, final report, 1124, 1128, 1130 Islington Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. Are there any speakers on Islington Avenue? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor DeChano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move staff recommendations.
Councillor DeChano moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 31-3, final report, 1736 Weston Road, zoning bylaw amendment application. We have a couple of speakers. Nadir Kadri. Good morning, welcome. Is it Nader? Nader, that was close.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
welcome. You have 5 minutes.
My name's Heather Al. This is my colleague, Nader Kadri. We're from Weston
So
Consulting.
you guys both speaking, or you're speaking together?
Collectively together.
Okay, so 5 minutes, thank you.
We're representing the applicant. We've read staff's report, and we have no concerns with the conditions that they've let out. We're going to be working with our lawyer in the coming weeks to address the conditions regarding the parking leases, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. Questions of the deputy? Councilor Nunziata, question.
Yes, so what do you mean you're gonna be meeting with your lawyer to discuss the parking issues? What does that mean?
Sorry, city staff have requested that we update our lease agreements. There are two for off-site parking, so we'll be working with our lawyer to meet the city's requirements within the time that we've got allotted.
So where would you have the off-street parking?
So there's two off-site agreements that are in place, and they've been in place for quite some time. One is on the Metrolinx lot, and the other one is on the daycare site.
Yes, and so Metrolinx is signing an agreement to allow you to park?
So we have a pre-existing lease agreement.
Yes, and they're going to extend that agreement?
That's what we need to work on over the next couple of weeks.
But they haven't agreed?
We haven't, sorry, go ahead.
It's not that it needs to be extended, they just want, like, more detail included in the lease, such as including, like, a site plan with the dimensions of the parking spaces. But the lease has been signed by Metrolinx. They've agreed to loan the parking spaces.
So it's just a site plan that you have to, and what about the daycare center? The daycare center is allowing you to use their facility as well?
It's a very similar condition. Staff are asking us to include a site plan within the lease agreement that we've got in place with the daycare as well.
Okay, now I noticed that just recently there was a sign that was put up on the building for redevelopment. Is that church being redeveloped?
Not to my knowledge.
Because there's a sign posted on the building. The last time I drove by there was.
For redevelopment?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, that's not to our knowledge. Unfortunately, all we know is that we were requested by staff to take down an existing sign that did not comply with the sign bylaw. That has been done since, and whether or not there's any other developments that are taking place on that site, I'm not aware of any. That might be a better question for staff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers to the item? No further speakers? Seeing none, questions of staff? Questions of staff, thank you. Councilor Nunziata.
So, as far as the recommendations and their agreement with Metrolinx, and so you're okay with the recommendations, and are you aware of any potential application coming in for that corner, because there's a sign?
No, it could be, there is one just next door, just a few doors down at 1746, which may be where the confusion comes from, but I'm not aware of
And
that.
it doesn't include the church?
No, not the church, not as far as I'm aware, no.
As far as you're aware of. Okay, so you're fine with the...
Yeah, we just need them to formalise the parking agreements, because as it stands, there's no legal obligation for the parking to be provided by the owners, so that's what we're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Councilor Nunziata.
Yeah, I'll just move the recommendation.
Councilor Nunziata moved the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving right along, we decided to deal with 31.5 before 31.4. So we'll go to 31.5, status report, Bloor West Village Avenue study. We have a number of speakers. First speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Doucette wanted a presentation first, and staff are setting up the laptop, which may take a couple of minutes, so we'll set that up and just take a break for a couple of minutes.
What's that? I gotta go party with Adrian Backshot and a bunch of How long is the meeting gonna be tonight? Hey, can we, I got the insurance. Can we give her a speaker right away? This one, I know, but see, where is that? No, talk to these two. I know, but the people here, I think we'll have those.
Brad, I found Joe out in the hallway.
Oh.
I let him know too, so he's gonna go track down Mike.
It's just the same thing, it's only make it worse
Yeah, he was just out in front, so I told him, but he's gotta go find Mike.
Yeah. How about the heat?
It's been 10 minutes, why is it fixed?
Okay, can I get councilors back to chamber for quorum? Presentation's ready to go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Crisanti, Councilor Campbell. Shall I even call him Emily's name? Is he around? Okay. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Brent Raymond. I'm with DTAH. We're the consultants hired by the city to lead the team for the Bloor West Village Avenue study. And, okay, thank you. So the reason that we did this avenue study, there are a number of reasons for this, but primarily the city council and staff identified this part of Bloor West Village as a priority avenue study in 2014. And the study area goes effectively from the Humber River to Keel Street. It's 2.7 kilometers in length with over 240 properties along that study area. The first BIA in the world, and some might say the universe, with over 400 members. It's extremely well served by higher order transit with 5 subway stations. And the study area was slightly revised through the process by staff to more comprehensively evaluate some inconsistencies and do appropriate land use investigation along the corridor. So as part of that process, there were 20 properties that were added. 2 of those properties were in the Swansea area between Runnymede and Kennedy. Both of those are narrow, single-story buildings between the sites on the avenue and a 4-story apartment building. And the other 18 were in the High Park area, where that boundary was revised to use the subway corridor as the northern boundary to the avenue site and to take those properties up to what was the neighborhoods. So those 2 adjustments were made. You'll hear some of the deputants in the room following myself talking about natural heritage in this area, and this was certainly raised as a primary concern by a great number of people in the neighborhood, especially around Hyde Park. And so in response to that, for the first time ever as part of an avenue study, the city commissioned a natural heritage and a hydrogeology study as part of that. So there were a number of agencies and departments within the city that collaborated on the terms of reference for that. There is a recommendation in your staff report for the review of the current woodland and savanna management plan that exists for Hyde Park at this point. So the process that we went through here in developing our recommendations and the summary, first we had what we heard, a great number of public meetings and other communications, our own professional expertise in doing this type of work in Toronto and elsewhere, an understanding of the policy context. And through that, we developed over 150 study recommendations, which are summarized within your staff report. There are a number of parallel projects that are also going on within the area. You'll hear about the High Park apartment neighborhood study today as well. There's also a Heritage Conservation District study. So where we are right now is talking about the Avenue study. What will happen over the next year is that staff will continue to consult with the public on all of this work as they develop the implementation tools and report back to Community Council in the first quarter of 2019. So the way we described and organized the study area was into what we call character areas, and there were 5 in total. One of them we decided through the process to not have any recommendations because we didn't see any change happening there. So what we have is the rest of the corridor in 4 character areas. So the basic framework here that the recommendations revolve around are urban structures, so looking at street-related buildings, a walkable environment, place-making opportunities, and emphasizing and creating a green character. The public realm, looking at opportunities for new open spaces, whether they be on larger development sites or perhaps the opportunity of some of the parking lots turning to parks in the future. And then other pedestrian-focused improvements like mid-block connections, streetscape improvements. And then around the apartment neighborhood frontage, looking at broader setbacks to the buildings and what we call green fingers, or the space between those buildings. And then the views and vistas. This is an area of the city where you actually have some vistas, so it's quite important either by having streets terminate along Bloor West or going east-west along the topography of Bloor West. So new buildings should emphasize and take advantage of that. We went through an exercise of demonstrating and testing the recommendations that we had on various sites throughout the study area, and none of these are saying that any site has more permission than another. It's really just for testing and demonstrating and showing what the results of that would be. So just a few images of some of the built form outcomes that could potentially happen. It's not to say that these will happen, but this is potentially if those sites were to redevelop. So in the West Village, at the western end of the study area, within the central area, the Village Main Street that we're calling it. And in this particular view, you'll note the addition of a civic space, a green space, along the corridor to create a village square. Around the Runnymede Library, what we call the East Village, and then around the frontage of High Park. And what you'll note here is the scale of the buildings as part of the Avenue study recommendations compared to the apartment neighborhood, which is in behind, and the Daniels High Park development, which is just to the right of the image. And some ground level renderings of some of the ideas and the character of what's possible with redevelopment. So the idea of the village square, something sorely needed along Bloor West. And then around the Runnymede Library, the scale of development and the potential streetscape improvements possible in time. So some of the highlights of the implementation recommendations coming out of the Avenue study. Updates to the official plan, redesignation of those 2 properties in Swansea from neighborhoods to mixed-use areas, and then resolving some zoning inconsistencies. Having a site and specific area policy for the study area. And within that, we are stating to have the maximum height in stories identified in that policy, but the metric, the actual number, or the height in meters would be within the zoning. And the reason for that is we don't want to have applicants have to go through an official plan amendment every time they want to change that metric, whether it's 30 stories to 31. That's an arduous exercise to go through. We also identify a number of implementation tools that can be used for different things. An update to the Swansea secondary plan, again for those 2 properties, zoning amendments, recommendations around unit sizes to support more complete communities and have family-size units, updates with the mid-rise performance standards to be more consistent with the study recommendations, and then the ongoing coordination with the parallel studies. So that's my short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I just have a quick question. So we're not deciding anything here today. You're just giving us an update on this project. And you mentioned you're going to go back to the community and consult. How many meetings do you see that taking place? Any idea? Ballpark?
We were looking at, because as part of this study so far, we have a local advisory committee. We are planning on going back to them with a recommendation and probably go back to a larger community consultation meeting too. So the number of LAC meetings, it'd probably be maybe 1, 2 meetings, and then another larger meeting. That hasn't been determined at this
Yeah, but in the community, there'd be time for the constituents to
Oh,
come
definitely,
and
yes.
have their input into it, but we're not deciding anything, you just give us an update today.
That's correct, yes.
Great. Those are my questions. Thank you. Any, further questions? Seeing none, then we'll go to our speakers. Thank you very much. Okay, our first speaker is Viola Vargra. Viola? Oh, there we are. Good morning, welcome back. How are you? You know the process, thank you. 5 minutes, thank you.
All right. I'm still want to talk about the limits of the parameters of the study. When the city decided to make this an avenue adjacent to High Park, north of High Park, somebody randomly chose it. I heard, this is what my understanding, and said, let's put the tall buildings here. And not understanding that they opened up what is the jewel of our city, a gold rush, literally opened the doors to, we have the most intensification outside of the center of the city here now. And I feel that this study is not sufficient to stem this gold rush. Puts a little bit of blockade, granted. What High Park is a ANSI, probably it's the biggest. ANSI is Area of Natural Scientific Interest, provincially designated in 1989, and it was downloaded subsequently by Mike Harris. And the province has been waiting for a recommendation by the city for a while now, because I've been talking to them, to create new tools. I think what is needed here is a new category, sensitive area, because this is a watershed of High Park, and High Park is already showing signs of decline. In 2013, there was a fish die-off, and the Ministry of Natural Resources, I spoke to them at the time, they said it's probably these buildings that are creating this hydrological problem, a toilet, what I call a toilet. And because, anyway, whatever. And there's other things as well that is happening in High Park. Not enough water's coming in Windigo Pond because of these developments have blocked off the two developments. When the sewage system was changed, they've not allowing water in. These developments are going to have effect on High Park. The studies that you commissioned are kind of like science fiction. They're saying continue developing, but that natural heritage will be protected. That's preposterous. So what the government is going to be changing tomorrow, and perhaps all governments, NDP, Liberal, Conservative, will be in favor of I think what's needed here is uploading. That was a mistake. It kind of created a loophole where the provincial government has their hands were tied, so they can't even tell you what they really think about this. And I think it would be important to get their opinion about this, untie their hands by asking them for new category, new tools, because this is a very unique situation, and you guys cannot stop this like this. This is a gold mine. We're having a gold rush here, and we will see in August and September, Minto and Great West Life, I think they're going to easily shove this little hurdle that you've put in their way aside, and they're going to build double density, more development than it's just so huge what is proposed here, what they want here. It's mind-boggling. But you guys should have known this when you made this an avenue, that this would happen. that you would create a run, you know, a gold rush, Klondike. This land is worth more than any land in Toronto, that the developers will want to maximize it. So I'm saying the study is not enough. The parameters of the study were not, did not address this provincial matter, and it needs to be, or we will, the study will be of not much use. Anyway, that's my opinion, and I've talked to the province on this, and they're waiting patiently for some sort of response from the city government, because they cannot do anything without your without direction from you, because you
wrap up, please.
It was downloaded on you, and therefore you are responsible for it, to ask them if for anything. And the thing is, if you ask them, they will they have to respond to you.
Okay,
they have to give you what you want. That's how this works.
Thank you. Your time's up. Thank you very much. Questions? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker, Dania Chuma. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes, thank you.
I am a resident slash property owner in the Bloor West Village. I have been in the village since 1979 in 4 different locations regarding business. I venture to say that this is a gem in the city, and but we are, to redefine ourselves, this is Toronto. One of the things that I find that is very difficult to deal with in terms of councilmen, et cetera, is that very often people do make decisions about an area and have no idea what is actually happening. For example, does anybody on this in this committee know what the tax rate, which is the cash cow of the Bloor West Village, are the businesses along Bloor Street, which this study impacts, between Jane and between Keogh, what the taxes on 15-foot frontage are? Does anybody here know? On a 2-story.
You're not allowed to ask us questions. That's
I know, but I'm just throwing that out because I don't think anybody does know.
I can tell you, Kingsley's taxes are less than my word. But anyway, those.
Just for information, it runs between $43,000, $30,000 if there's one apartment above the store. A 2-story, 15 to 17-foot frontage. What is impacting, what is going to impact, of course people are developing, but that's, as I said, another story, and this is Toronto. This is not a suburb. This is Toronto. We are on the subway line. We do have High Park, which is a gem. Nobody else in the city has such a beautiful venue, and I think that the government programs, whatever they are, has to support the continued status of the High Park, But my main concern is the introduction of bicycle lanes, which will prevent parking in front of the whole strip, which is the commercial strip. This is wonderful, and all 3 bike riders that I've seen coming from, I was downtown yesterday in the evening, all 3 bike riders were not along that whole, from Yonge Street all the way to the Bloor West Village, which apparently they are thinking of extending. All 3 bike riders were not within the law. They were not within their lines, etc. And in the meantime, it was bumper to bumper, and all 3 bike riders were along that lane. This is miles and miles of city streets. If we continue the bike lanes into the Bloor West Village, this will immediately put a further damper on all the businesses that are there along the street. So far, the only businesses that are robust and have come in is the marijuana store, doing all kinds of business, which is on Armadale. The other stores are basically becoming dental offices and dental offices. That's about it. So what makes the Bloor West Village is the component of residents and some sort of businesses that cater, that will have a cup of coffee, that perhaps a private ownership patisserie, that are shops that form the whole Bloor West Village, that give it the identity that is so unique in the city. And my main concern is that these studies are wonderful by people who come in for 2 or 3 that are here for 1 or 2 or 3 years. From someone who has been here since 1979, I have seen the deterioration of the Bloor West Village in terms of businesses. People can no longer own them. The only people who are opening are Bell, Verizon, Freedom, because they can carry that. So the identity of the Bloor West Village is disappearing. And what we would like the identity to be is for it to be a neighborhood. By adding a bicycle lane for all 3 bicycle riders, or 10 bicycle riders, 6 months of the year, we will prevent further erosion of any kind of business development in that area. I'm not saying development, just status quo. I'm not even questioning taking those buildings down. But please consider the harm, what it did to St. Clair, what it's doing to other areas. Perhaps other areas need much more bicycle, but we have so many beautiful streets that to prevent cars from parking along the Bloor West Colony. Okay, that's all. So that's my biggest concern. We want to maintain the neighborhood. We want to maintain the businesses in the neighborhood, which make up the quality of living in that area. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, question. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Holliday, question.
Thanks for speaking to us. I just wondered if you had followed the debate around the Bloor Street bike lanes in the inner core of the city and sort of watched that unfold.
The debate is one thing. When you're driving through it, is horrific. I have yet to see one bicyclist even on those lanes, and they put those poles in between along Bathurst in that area.
Understood.
Where it's just horrific. A car can't even pass, and there's one bike rider, and he's he's outside of his lane anyway.
Absolutely understood. And you can guess from the questions, I'm pretty familiar with the discussion around that. Are you aware that the last iteration of the city's downtown core plan, the TO core plan, also speaks to the Bloor Street bike lanes and extending them further?
I am, and that's why I'm here, if there's any way to prevent that, because it really will affect further all those $43,000 a year, a month people who are paying, because you can't even rent the place. We have more rentals in that area than we've ever had. For rent, and then finally Verizon or Bell comes in.
So I guess the last question, I have to ask you these in a form
Yes,
of a
that's
question,
fine.
but are you aware that a very important part of the process is for the businesses to come together to form a cohesive group to make their thoughts heard about the bicycle lanes? And that doesn't always happen in all of the cases of these files, and I wondered if you were aware of that and if you were prepared or integrated in some way to...
Well, we have a BIA in our area, and we have spoken to that, but then the city can just override all of that.
They can. Are you aware that they can, but are you aware that the BIA has a strong and powerful voice and should speak it?
Well, we are working on it. Everybody who belongs to the BIA, as far as I know, are protesting it. Anybody who's doing business on that stretch is protesting it. It's impossible for you not to have a car park in front of your place of business, because that's what makes it a very vibrant area. People come in, they come out, there's parking in the back. So there is sufficient parking even with public spaces, but when you lack that one that you want to jump in, get your cabbage or get your whatever, and then keep going, and that's another story, and that is what creates the Bloor West Village. It's a short strip of land in the city, but it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Veronica Wynn.
Thank you. Veronica Wynn from the Swansea Area Ratepayers Association and Group. we were participants in the on the LAC committee and in the community consultation process. And we would just want to compliment the DTAH for their high degree of professionalism and patience in dealing with this process, especially with me, probably. But anyway, the final summary of the actual study, not the status report, has many redeeming recommendations. But I am here to question the authenticity of the community consultation process and the fact that these OPA amendments for the redesignation of neighbourhood properties and changing them to mixed use was not shared with the community during the consultation process. In fact, Mr. Brent Raymond, who I think very highly of, he is at a general community consultation meeting on December the 4th. He said emphatically that he was not making a recommendation for changing to mixed use. So the Swansea area ratepayers strongly opposed the city's intervention and direction in the conversion of these neighbourhood properties. We, at the invitation of the planning department, we participated in a teleconference. We wrote up an alternative proposal that would keep these properties as neighbourhoods and protect the Swansea secondary plan to no avail. Further consultation with the LAC committee, as suggested in the status report, presumes that we can move beyond the lack of consultation on these issues and develop OPA amendments for recommendations on which the community at large was not consulted. We suggest that the anticipated further LAC committee consultation should include the missing discussions of whether these amendments are appropriate in the first place and alternatives that would protect the Swansea and surrounding neighbourhoods. And this goes for High Park too. The majority of the designated properties, cross that out. We have here a major concern which impacts the objectivity, transparency and authenticity of the Bloor West Village Avenue study process. It is also prejudicial to amend the neighbourhood boundaries of a secondary plan within the official plan with revisions in an avenue study describing them as minor inconsistencies. Along with the suggested removal of density designations or limits, these are amendments with major implications for the Swansea secondary plan and the Bloor West Village within the official plan. The Sinclair Avenue study, which was held up not by this issue but by another issue I think it's still being held up on that issue for about 10 years, and the Ossington Avenue study, both have regrets, and we've checked this out, because of these attributes of redesignating neighbourhoods to mixed use. But of course it's too late because they've gone through it. But we're ahead of the game and we know that this should not happen. They have found out too late that the OPA conversions have ruined their avenues. For us in the Bloor West Village, the character and quality of life in the village are in jeopardy because now we have even the properties on the north side because there's a subway. Don't look at the Humber Odeon. It's on top of a subway, and look at where that's going. So the character and quality of life in our village are in jeopardy.
Thank you. Under 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Councillor Campbell.
Question of the speaker.
I'm sorry, questions of Campbell. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a long day, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Campbell, question of the deputy.
Where along Bloor has it changed from apartment neighborhood to mixed use that you're concerned about?
Well, I think it's 130 Kennedy and 121 Runnymede. What it is that along the frontage,
At the south side or the north side?
the south side. Oh, these are all the south side. Swansea's on the north, on south side. On the north side, there's a subway, so they think they're protected, but I doubt it. But these two properties, they're kind of, what you call, legal non-conforming. They were, in 1999, they were, one of the properties was given permission to be legal non-conforming so that it would have, have some sort of commercial in it, but it insisted that it be in the neighborhood. It still remained a neighborhood designation. But what happens is when you extend the mixed use, you are extending the neighborhood boundaries, you are extending the angular plane, we're going up 45 degrees, and despite all your promises in an avenue study that you will maximize the heights, we know that's a fairy tale. So when the rubber hits the road, when a developer comes in to develop, and the north side is not protected because we know for sure, and the current development at the Humber Odeon is well, it says it's 12 stories, but it's 42 meters, which actually is 14. But anyway, so that's why we're very strong, and we actually, I said in this teleconference, when you've got an opinion that so adamantly supports, this compromise of the village, why would you do it? Why would you move forward with it?
So you don't feel that you were adequately consulted in the
No,
process?
well, the thing is, because I spotted the discrepancy, because actually it wasn't that I was spotted. One of the Miss Reed approached me at the meeting because Mr. Raymond had not mentioned it in his presentation that he was going to do this mixed use, and she approached me and said, "Oh, he forgot to mention." And of course, that sends me off. I'm not one to kind of hold back, but anyway, so I asked the question of Mr. Raymond in the meeting: was the intention to change this to mixed use, to do this, to introduce mixed use for neighborhood properties? And he said emphatically, we are not recommending mixed-use zoning.
And just one last question. How many homeowners do you represent with Swansea?
Well, I think it's about, what, 10,000 or something, would it be? I'm not too sure about the numbers.
I mean, in terms of, like, is it a paid-up membership, or is it...
Oh, you mean for ours?
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
yeah.
Well, we have a communications. We have different communications depending on the area. We probably have about 500 or 600 people on a communication list, but if you're talking about the whole area...
No, I know what you mean. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, just before we go to our next speaker, I'd just like to recognize a good friend of this chamber, former member of the chamber, and I can speak for everybody up here, a good friend, former city councilor Peter Leon, at the back there. Hiding at the back. Hi, Peter, how are you? Got the mustache going from November already. Cheating. Welcome, Peter. Great to see you back. Okay, our next speaker is Tanya Tusoni. Good morning, sir. Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Tanu Tassina. I'm a resident of 17 Hartcroft Road. I and my family have lived there for 34 years. But today I'm here before you as a representative for the Hartcroft Road Olympus Avenue residents. This is a neighborhood that is immediately south and abutting that part of the study area known as East Village. We, the residents, have for several years formed as an active and galvanized force about development applications along this part of Bloor Street West. Today's comments have been developed by a working group selected by and from these residents. In our view of the Avenue study, we identified some 40 recommendations, which have direct bearing on our Harcroft Olympus Avenue neighborhood. The majority of these recommendations are acceptable, and some even warrant a thumbs up. There are, however, 7 areas that require attention or change by city staff on your direction as they move to refine and implement the consultant study. I will first address 4 matters where we, the Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue residents, find clear and positive response and change by staff is needed. Firstly, and most significantly, the height at which the rear angular plane extending at 45 degrees begins on the south side of Bloor Street West must be at its presently set height of 10.5 meters. The consultant's proposed 13.5 meters is not consistent with the Avenue Study Guide Principle 5.5, which requires to minimize impacts on adjacent neighborhoods. Between the South Kingsway and Glendon Avenue, there are some 50 residences whose side yards or rear yards immediately abut the study area on the south side. These 50 households warrant the same, less aggressive, 10.5 meters height for the angular plane that is set for the north side of Bloor Street, which abuts the study area of 3 parks and 6 public parking lots and TTC bays, and only 1 residence. Relatedly, the implementation requirement of the 10.5 height must specify average grade at Bloor Street and not the generic, imprecise term ground that the consultant uses. Secondly, the requirement for storage and outside handling for new redevelopment on the south side of Bloor must mandate inside storage of wastes. There is no other buffer option for these 50 residences immediately abutting south side redevelopment along Bloor Street. Thirdly, while the consultant's report addresses at length the requirement for step backs of the building frontages along Bloor Street West, the report is unfortunately silent about step backs for corner building frontages along flank streets. To avoid the creation of a canyon syndrome when entering a side street from Bloor Street, or when looking from the side street towards Bloor Street, the same principle set for Bloor Street for beginning angular planes must be applied to these side streets, namely beginning at a height of 80% of the side street right-of-way. Lastly, planning staff need to consider approaches which differentiate major intersections from minor intersections. Not all intersections along Bloor Street are the same. A massing consideration or application for a minor intersection needs to be more respectful of the residential nature of the neighborhoods along these flanking streets. There are 3 additional areas which, seemingly editorial, need attention and rectification by staff. Firstly, the recommendation regarding Performance Standard 7A, while specifying sidewalk widths for other parts of the study areas, needs to also specify a sidewalk width for the East Village, and it doesn't. Secondly, recommendations R37, 38, and 39 presently refer variously to 1,700 square meters and 1,750 square meters. A consistent measure has to be set by staff for retail ground floor space. And the third area requiring attention is about future mapping, which may be prepared to implement the study. The single-family residences at 17 and 18 Harcroft Road both face Harcroft Road, both are zoned presently residential, and both have their northerly lot lines presently defining the neighborhood of Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue. The mapping in the consultant study creates an unacceptable jog in the present symmetry from one side of Harcroft Road to the other, and is inconsistent with the guiding principle 5.7 to respect and complement appropriate zoning of the studying area and its adjacent neighborhoods. The present residential zoning for 17 Harcroft Road needs to be maintained. I'll provide Community Council Secretary with a copy of my statement and the recommendations from the Harcroft and Olympus Avenue residents, but I close with one specific request for you today, namely that you direct that the Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue residents be given representation on the local advisory committee, which is to work with and be consulted by city's planning staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker, Lenka Holubek. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Lenka.
Pull that down, Lenka. There we go. Thank you.
My name is Lenka Halubek, and I will be also speaking on the other issue in the neighborhood of Blue West Village Avenue and High Park. So I will be very brief.
You speak to
Not
both,
to
okay.
become repetitive, you will just be too much sick of me. My comments will be addressing protection of natural heritage, obviously High Park, and there is also Humber Park. The issues from both, the issues connected to both secondary studies, Blue West Village Avenue study and High Park apartment neighborhood character study, as far as their impacts on natural heritage in High Park, are the same. And actually, both those secondary studies are potentially driving quite a significant increase of development and density in the area. Potentially, from the Blue West Village Avenue study, there could be up to 2,000 more residents within the next 5 years, and potentially from High Park apartment neighborhood character study area, the density has not been defined there in a number of residents, but in the surface area of from 19.6, which is the study area hectares, it would be about 30% of the surface of floor. So translated into the number of residents, it could be up to 3,000 residents. So combined over the years, we could be seeing here 5,000 more residents, which is a little city, or perhaps not so little city. And the impacts combined from those buildings and people would represent very significant and potentially critically undermining impacts on this very unique natural heritage. Those impacts relate to watershed, those impacts relate to skyrocketing user demands on park. Those user demands are projected to very complex impacts of human disturbance, and the land use decisions, actually, according to Provincial Policy Statement 2014, and according to the city official plan, as amended Office June 2015, and according to the amendment OPA 262, which are the city environmental policies, where the city plan was always consistent with provincial policy statement, but this amendment even increased the necessity to comply with provincial policy statement. So according to this amendment, the land use decisions, Chapter 4, the official plan, are here the first in line to protect natural heritage within the city boundaries and outside of the city boundaries. Those land use decisions, the planning decisions, are what we are now talking about. This is when we are planning our development. If the development is planned in adjacency or near significant natural heritage, that decision must, according to provincial policy statement, take not just into consideration, but natural heritage protection is prioritized. So this is the first for those decisions must be concerned about. If we overdevelop the areas adjacent or near to natural heritage, then we are setting ourselves into the cycle of making the impacts on that natural heritage, whether it's watershed or indirect cumulative impacts resulting from increased skyrocketing use, when the city is ultimately and legally responsible for natural assets in Toronto. They are responsible for managing those assets.
Can you wrap up, please? Your time's up. Thank you. Questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much. Our next deputant, Stephen Dudney. Stephen? Good morning, sir, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of council. My name is Stephen Dudney, and I'm here representing the Bloor West Village Residents Association. In case none of you are aware, we represent an area, north side of Bloor Street, west end beginning at Humber River and extending to the east, Gothic Avenue. So it's a fairly large section of Bloor West Village, all on the north side of Bloor. As of April this year, we had a membership of over 300 households and a contact list of over 700 households in the community. So we feel we have a pretty solid outreach and a good understanding of where our community stands on particularly intensification of Bloor West Village, which generally we're very, very much supportive of. But it must be responsible and responsive and sensitive to the existing context. And so over the last number of years, we've been working very intensively with city staff and our councillor on the study, which we're very pleased and gratified to see us finally come to this point in the process. From our perspective, this has been a very well organized study. There's been extensive consultation, and we understand the concerns of some of the other speakers here today about the kind of consultations that take place, but we're confident that the ongoing consultations proposed in the consultant's report will deal with some of the issues that have been raised, and we encourage that this process move forward quickly because it's been much awaited and very necessary to simply get on with the work that now staff has to do to put the regulatory framework in place. But just as importantly, we'd like to acknowledge the support of Councillor Doucette and the Etobicoke York Community Council, which of course has been essential to getting us to this point in the process. Although a number of recommendations in the Avenue study will require further discussion and refinement, as I mentioned, we generally agree with the direction proposed and look forward to participating in the next phase of consultations that are summarized in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Our next deputant, Michael Rosenberg. Michael Rosenberg? Oh, there he is, there he is. Good morning, sir, welcome, you have 5 minutes.
So my comments are about the Main Street area, and I think that this is really not an appropriate area for intensification along a Main Street business area like this. I think that this whole concept of avenues is mistaken, and that actually where you want to put the development is essentially behind those blocks, like half a block away from the main street. Business main streets should not consist of mid-rise buildings. Those destroy the character of the area. Now, I've seen at least a couple of good references in the sense that you're starting to use sky view as well as shadow in your description. So that provides a recognition of some of the issues, but nevertheless, the proposal still calls for the 45-degree angular plane to begin at 5 or 6 stories, depending on which part of the street you're talking about. It should begin at 3 stories. So in other words, continue to protect the character of the area as a place where you can walk along and it looks like a normal street as it does now. That forces the actual development, if any, to go half a block away where you can put the taller part of the building interior to the block and not on the main street. The main street should be considered neighborhoods just as much as a purely residential neighborhood. In fact, a mixed-use area is more of a neighborhood because it does have residents and it does have commercial activity. So you've actually got people there fully during the daytime, in the evening, and at all times. It's more of a neighborhood, and the 3-story concept should apply even more so on the front side than it does on the back side. So I just have the impression that people just think of density and intensification as a concept, and they don't realize what they're actually doing when they change from 3 stories or 2 or 3 stories to 6 to 8 to 10 stories. That's completely a different street. I mean, once you go up to 6 stories, you might as well go up to 40 stories, because when you're standing under it, it just looks like a tall building. I mean, maybe from 3 blocks away, there's a difference between a 40-story building and a 6-story building. But when you're in front of it, the real difference is between the 2 or 3-story building and the 6 to 8-story building. And you have to stop that. The mid-rise guidelines should just be abolished entirely. That was a mistake. Like, the centers within the city make sense, where you actually have taller buildings. But the main streets as a place for intensification should just be ruled out. Those should not be the areas where intensification goes. I just don't think you understand that these are not just numbers, like, oh, let's see if we can fit in a few more people here and a few more people there. It's a threshold. The distinction between 3 and 6 stories is more important than the distinction between 6 stories and 30 stories. You have to stop development at the 3-story level in the places where that is the character of the area. There are plenty of other places where you can put 40-story buildings and more than make up for all the mid-rise buildings, which you shouldn't have at all. Just get rid of the mid-rise category, leave the 3-story main streets as 3-story main streets, and put tall buildings where it's appropriate to put tall buildings. But don't have mid-rise. It was a mistake, and you have to recognize it as a mistake because it does destroy the character of the main streets in the city. And just a couple of examples. I was walking along St. Clair recently, where they put in one of these oversized buildings that's laughingly called mid-rise. And then I saw on the other side of the street, immediately opposite, was the proposal to put in another one. So that's what you get. Like, it can be absolutely overwhelming. Imagine 2 of those buildings on both sides of the street facing each other. So the whole concept of the height of a building being 80% of the width of the right-of-way should be removed.
Please wrap up.
Just put in the 3-story, 45-degree angular plane and leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Is there questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Rosenberg, thank you. Our next applicant, Leslie Gooding. Good morning, welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes, thank you.
I am from High Park Natural Environment Committee. We have been advising about High Park for 25 years. And this has been an opportunity for us to learn a few things. 2 things are not possible to overstate. One is the natural heritage quality of High Park. That is a globally rare plant community, and it is unusually biodiverse even for plant communities, and it supports a lot of biodiversity beyond the plant community. And consequently, it has a designation of the ANSI designation. The second thing, which it is not possible to overstate, is the level of protection that provincial policies provide to natural heritage areas and features. Natural heritage shall be protected for the long term. Sweet little word shall, that's an order. Development and site alteration shall not occur on an ANSI or lands adjacent to an ANSI unless it can be shown there is no negative impact from single, multiple, or successive development activities. The lands north of Bloor Street and the lands in the character area, those lands are adjacent to the High Park natural heritage feature. Negative impacts are of 2 kinds. There is there are direct impacts, sort of destruction that the building will bring, and there is indirect. The direct is the easy one to deal with. If you have a chimney with chimney swifts in it, then you go to the regulations and you do what the regulations say. That is relatively easy. The hard part are the indirect impacts. The indirect impacts is human disturbance in the natural heritage feature itself. We do have a management plan. We have had one since 2002. It is largely restoration, and those efforts have been and will continue to be critical in protecting the natural heritage. There is a deficiency in addressing the human disturbance within the natural heritage feature. And a further one, the requirement to protect lands from site alteration applies to city-owned lands in High Park which are not part of the natural heritage. So you have heard mention that there is a recommendation to upgrade the management plan. I would suggest that this recommendation is of some considerable urgency, because until the city has addressed the provisions for protecting its natural heritage according to the provincial guideline, which is the Natural Heritage Reference Manual, currently it is not possible for any proponent to show there is no negative impact on the natural heritage. If no proponent can show there is no negative impact on the natural heritage, development and site alteration shall not be permitted. And so I know that you will, as in your role as councillors, will, because I think P&E will be bringing forward a recommendation to update the management plan. It will and it will also need to be adequately resourced. It is not a simple issue to turn how the city manages High Park in order to give the priority on natural heritage protection that the planning policies and guidelines require. That is not going to be a simple process. Because the city is a big and complex place, and various departments have different priorities. But I will suggest that it is a matter of some urgency, because until that is in place, the development proposals we're considering are not consistent with the PPS.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any further speakers to the item? No more there, Rosemary? Okay, questions of staff. Councillor Doucette.
Planning, please. Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Greg. I never call you Mr. Burns. Greg. Can you just confirm, I know that Brent touched on this, what exactly is before us today, and what are our steps moving forward? I know you said this, I just want you to repeat it so the councillors understand where we're going from here.
So what we have is just a status report. The city retained a consultant. Sorry, can you hear me back there? The city's retained a consultant to undertake a study. So what we have is the consultant's report. From that consultant's report, staff will look at the recommendations in there and start developing the sort of implementation tools, the official plan amendments, the zoning bylaw, the design guidelines. We are going to go back to the community and sort of, when we have developed those documents to a certain level, and have further communications with them. So there will be further meetings with the community.
So we'll be having more LAC meetings?
There will be more LORMAC, yes. There will be.
And more public, one more public.
That's correct, yes. I mean, we can also determine at the time, depending what the issues are raised as we go forward.
Right. Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
I do.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Can you describe the process around community consultation with respect to the removal of travel lanes for bike infrastructure as described in the reports?
The consultant's report was to explore opportunities for bike lanes. It wasn't making recommendations on it, because at the time when we were doing the study, there wasn't a mandate to sort of put bicycle lanes at this part of Bloor Street. So what they did is explored various options, and they only recommended sort of a preferred option at the time. So anything going forward with bicycle lanes would have to go through a fuller, extensive process.
So the report contains a preferred option, though, and and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I read the recommendations, it advances the consultant's report forward to have you develop changes to the official plan around that. So if an appendix of the report says the preferred option is whatever, and in this case it is to change some of the lanes, does that not carry forward with it?
I don't, Neil, if you want to take that.
I think what it means is that this is a recommendation by the consultant to the city, and staff will take that recommendation, we'll consider it, we'll discuss it with our cycling infrastructure staff, and then we'll bring forward a recommendation through community council to city council on that aspect precisely. We're making extensive notes on all the conversations that have been brought up today about further consultation with the community about the cycling lanes, about the protection, about the ANSI. All of these issues will be looked at further, and the issue of the bike lanes on Bloor and how it fits within the city-wide policies will be reviewed, and a recommendation will be brought forward in that regard.
Any reason why there is such prominence to the transportation infrastructure in this? I mean, there's a whole chapter on it, it's chapter 11, and it's fairly extensive. I think the consultant's report was like 250 pages plus on travel, and a big part of that was cycling. How did we get to have that? How did we arrive at a position that took such prominence in this overall study, which is a huge volume of work, but it's a big piece.
I mean, as part of any study, you look at what are the transportation demands of a community, what the existing issues are, and if you are proposing intensification, is there any infrastructure that's required as part of that intensification? So you do need that background report, as we do with any development application.
Okay, even though it sort of talks about mode shift and reallocation of right-of-way. Like I know in planning studies you look at, demands placed on by intensification. The consultants will make some recommendations, but this sort of talks about changing the future. And
I mean, that was the recommendation from the consultant, sort of suggesting we should look to the future on potential changes in vehicle usership. The other thing is we also were looking at when we were introducing, or the suggestion, when it was the comment about the bicycle lane changes, what would that mean from a traffic perspective also? So it was related to development applications, but also changing the road system associated with the bicycle lanes.
I guess last question, how far did the consultation go? And the reason I say this is a change to the transportation infrastructure, as mentioned by the consultant, would have an impact far further west. So there aren't very many options to go east and west, including, you've got Lakeshore, Gardner, and then you've got Bloor, because you're impeded by High Park. So stakeholders in this would include people all points further west, because maybe they use Bloor Street as a route. So how far did that consultation go, and what did you see with people that were consulted with? Did you see engagement from people on points further west?
Do you want to? I mean, from the consultation that we dealt with, I mean, there was 2 public meetings. We had, 6 live meetings? Sure, maybe.
Thank you.
So I'm not the transportation consultant, but I can speak to the process that we went through. Again, there's official plan policy that directs us to look at this particular corridor. This is not the study identified in the network plan to say future study.
Yep.
It was just part of the avenue study. The option that we identified as being the recommended satisfied the transportation requirements in the broader network. That the deputant who was commenting on the inclusion of cycling lanes, taking away from parking, if you look at the cross-section, in fact, it maintains off-peak parking as well as 2 lanes of travel in each direction. So it maintains the vehicular through capacity that it does today.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that.
During the peak
hours. There are changes. I mean, could you concede that there are changes?
There are adjustments, and it will only happen with reconstruction as we see it.
Mm-hmm.
So we do identify in the avenue study in our recommendations that at some future time when the city is looking at this in more detail, that there'll be a more robust public engagement specific to the introduction of cycling infrastructure.
To a very direct point, the option suggested by the consultant, option 1, is it equal, less, or greater with respect to motor vehicle capacity throughput, and equal, less, or greater with respect to parking, according to existing conditions?
It's less with parking.
Okay.
Off-peak, but on-peak, off-peak, it's effectively the same.
Yep.
On-peak, it's different.
Okay. And
Through
then,
capacity, there is a reduction.
okay,
Person capacity, it's greater.
person capacity. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Doucette to speak.
So I will be moving the staff recommendation, and I want to start by thanking staff for all your work on this study, the Avenue study. I want to also thank the residents, one for coming today, really appreciate it, but particularly the LAC. The working group has had, 5, 6 meetings, public meetings. In fact, on page 13 of the report, for anyone who'd like to see, you'll see how many meetings we have had and how much consultation we've done at this point. What we have before us today is a status report. It is not a final report. There will not be a final report for a while because now what we have received from the consultants will come back to the community. I have heard from several of you, I've heard from you today where we have some tweaks to make, some changes to make, some input, more input. But we needed to have this status report and we needed to have the plan in front of us, or the proposed plan, for you to comment on it. It is an evolving process. It has been a long-awaited process. I think my first motion went in 2012 to do a study on Bloor Street. A second motion went in 2014 to do a study on Bloor Street, and I think we started really in 2016, 2017. So I do want to thank everyone for their input. And I do agree, one of the things we did hear loud and clear was, how do we protect High Park? Interestingly enough, an avenue study does not usually include natural heritage. It doesn't include something like High Park because I guess we haven't come across that before. You'll hear the same thing when we go to the next site in the character study. It doesn't normally look at a park like High Park. So this is where the study section we've done so far has actually taken longer to get to us today because of the work being done to look at the effects in High Park. But that's not going to be the end of it. Item 4 here, as Miss Gooding mentioned, we are going to be reviewing the High Park Woodland and Savannah Management Plan. And yes, I will be pushing to make sure the funding for that goes into, I'm hoping, the 2019 budget for parks, so they can go and do this study and do the review. We can't just put it on the back burner and say, oh, we'll get to it one day. This study, this review has to be done before any more development comes in along this section of Bloor Street or in High Park. Our first speaker also spoke to the fact of why is that section of Bloor by High Park and Avenue. I don't know. But one of the items in this big report, this many, many page report, does recommend removing the avenue designation from the south side of Bloor Street along High Park. That's one of the many recommendations in there. Now, we know that High Park was given to us by John and Jemima Howard. It will not be built on. It will remain High Park. But we've also got to make sure that what goes north of High Park on the other side of Bloor Street is also taken into consideration, which is also why we have recommendations on setbacks, on keeping the buildings further apart than we would allow maybe in the village, to have those corridors, the fingers, I think they call them fingers of green space. So a lot of thought has gone into this. I know a lot of comments from the community have shaped what we have before us today. But as I say, this is not a final report. I'm sure we're definitely, well, I know we're not definitely finished. And I ask the community to stay with us. LAC group, stay with us. Community, come out to our public meetings. Continue giving your input. Because this avenue study is going to be around a long time. It didn't just look at the High Park area. We actually asked to go right over to the Humber River, but as we heard, a section of that area, just coming back towards South Kingsway, was felt to be okay. The difference with this avenue study is we did break up Bloor Street into different sections. It's not the same on the north side or the south side, or in the East Village and the West Village and the middle. Each area has slightly different designations, and I think that is appropriate. You can't just say one size fits all, which is a mid-rise guideline. So that's why this study will identify what could be built in this neighborhood, but even more so, it's a study. Some things will be in the official plan, which will allow our staff, if a development does come in, to have the tools we've been always wanting to do on Bloor Street to protect our neighborhood, to keep High Park, to keep Bloor West being vibrant, and make sure we only have responsible development in the right place. So again, thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate your support and your help.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Councillor Holiday to speak. Deputy Mayor to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a small motion.
Looks big to me.
That one is not up in there, but that's okay.
Looks big.
It's the underlying portion. So I will make a brief comment. I have been very well known to be on record not to support the Bloor Street bike lanes. I see Bloor Street as an important access point for anyone that lives west of this location. You know, I think about it, I visit High Park from time to time with my young family. Sometimes we take transit, sometimes we drive. And any option that will change my ability to access points west, and frankly my constituents that I represent, is something that I can't accept. And for that reason, I would like to exclude any notion of changing the lane allocation along Bloor Street. It's congested on any day. Something that's going to take out left turn lanes, or worse, even travel lanes, is not something I'm prepared to support. So my motion reflects that I support the balance of the plan and all of the planning work, but I'd like to leave this idea of changing the lane behind. And this simply removes it from what we support at Community Council. I think that's extremely important to the people that I represent, and I'm not sure that this is a wise change in this area for some of the reasons that the speakers talked about today. Other than that, I appreciate all the work done by everybody on this. This is a very important part of the city, and it's a very nice part of the city, and I think the planning study and the changes will help support that in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Holiday. Question of the mover, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm trying to think of Deputy Mayor Holiday. It is a full report, and one of the items we had to look at was transportation and flow. In the report, it does say that this is a long-term vision, and seeing that Bloor Street, the road and the sidewalk were reconstructed in 2011, are you aware that this is a long-term plan, and maybe would you agree that it would really be up to the community, including residents to the west, to have the option of doing this in the future?
It's not clarification of the motion, but we get your point.
I am aware about the extended time frame and feel that it's very important.
That's not clarification of the motion.
I tried.
Okay. Any further speakers to the item? Okay, so we have Councillor Giorgio.
Very briefly, because I know that this is a matter that's coming back. And so while I agree in principle with the amendment being put forward by Deputy Mayor Holiday, I do think that particular issue, as far as a final decision is concerned, can come back with the final report. It's almost like I'm asking for a referral in the meantime to planning to consider your motion, Deputy Mayor, and bring it forward with the official plan amendment and the zoning amendment that will apply to this particular avenue. I might also add that, you know, being designated an avenue is actually quite a protective aspect of planning, because essentially what it does is allows, after studies, to basically say, here's what we believe is reasonable development as of right zoning on a particular strip of an avenue. And it is an avenue, it is an area that must accommodate some growth. It's a subway line, let's be realistic. To say that on a subway line we shouldn't have any more than 3 stories really is just incomprehensible. So going forward, we're in a big city, we do need intensification on Bloor Street. The question is how much intensification in this particular strip. And we will come, or at least planning staff will come forward with a report that identifies what is reasonable. I might also add that notwithstanding whatever official plan amendment and zoning amendment we adopt next year, there is nothing, absolutely nothing to prevent the developer, actually I think they have to wait 2 years, from coming forward with a zoning amendment application that exceeds whatever we contemplate as of right zoning on that particular strip. So, just so we understand, there will be development on that area. It's just a matter of what constitutes reasonable development. And I might add, I'm sensitive to the point brought forward by Deputy Mayor Holliday with respect to cycle lanes. But we'll wait until this all comes back to sort of crystallize recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Giorgio.
you,
Okay, so we have Councillor Holiday's motion on the screen. All in favor?
Can I have that recorded?
Recorded vote. All in favor?
I referred it.
I didn't know. Did you refer it? I didn't. Okay, all in favor of the motion?
In that case.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor DeChano, and Councillor Campbell. Opposed? Councillor DeGiorgio, Doucette, Palacio, Nunziata, Grimes. That fails. And what's the recommendation is just to staff recs? You moving the staff recs? All in favor of the staff recs? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So just moving this meeting along here, this next item 4, I think we can get done by lunch, but I just want to, Councillor Chano, to get him back here tonight for quorum, just want to know on 31.7, Renata Vestaville, are you here? Renata? Is there any other speakers to 31.7 besides Ms. Vestaville? Any other speakers? So I'm going to suggest we do 6 and 7. That'll allow Councillor Chano to get his meeting off and back for quorum tonight. So 31.6, Councillor DeChano, what are you doing with this?
I have a quick motion to defer.
Okay, deferral motion on for 31.6. Sorry, we didn't let the clerks know.
Did you ask for speakers?
Okay, no, but I want to get this other one. 4 people have been paid. I want to get this one before lunch. So I just want to get Councillor DeChano out so he can get his meeting off so he'll be back tonight.
That the Etobicoke York Community Council defer consideration of this item to its meeting on July 4th, 2018.
Good, Rosemary? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 31.7, request for direction report, 3429 Bloor Street West, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. Renata, are you here? Yeah, please come up. And this is the only speaker on the item, and then we'll go back to 4. And we should get 4 done by lunch. Welcome. Good morning. Thanks for your patience. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
So I live at 17 Green Lanes, and I do not object to the senior home, but I believe that 18-story development is excessive for the area. Proposed development is not keeping with the scale. New developments on south side of Bloor Street are 6-story high only. Infrastructure is not adequate to service 18-story proposed development. Even though the building is close to subway, this station is not equipped with elevator or escalator heading down towards the station. It's also already overcrowded. In medical emergency, we only have St. Joseph Hospital and Mississauga Hospital at Hurontario, which are both overcrowded. No free stall on Islington, it's too small, and parking lot is already full. There will be many new townhouses next to no frills, so the traffic will be increasing significantly. Sobeys at Bloor Street and Islington possibly will have underground parking, which not everybody may feel comfortable with. Loss of privacy, noise, disturbance, possibly more ambulances, fire trucks, wheel transit, beer and other deliveries, more visitors. I think the height for senior home is excessive. In case of emergency, it will be difficult to safely evacuate the elderly residents, and those requiring special assistance. Insufficient parking to accommodate the beer store customers, office workers, senior support team, residents, and visitors. Public parking not available in the area. Very short intersection to accommodate all the activities, which will create traffic problem and safety issues. Fieldway Street is road to nowhere. There are already 2 condos there and many townhouses are being finished, and Green Lanes is the only intersection with lights. The two-way street behind the building halfway will create confusion, plus all the traffic will be only on Green Lanes. Once the TTC parking lot will disappear, additional traffic on Bloor Street because people will be commuting in their cars to downtown. This will create issue to turn left or right. Cars going straight usually block Green Lanes. No option to wide Bloor Street, so with so much development of high-rises on Dundas from Kipling all the way to East Mall, traffic will increase a lot. Approval would create a precedent, meaning that would be difficult to object to similar proposal. I am hoping that not only wishes of developer, but also concern of the residents will be taken into consideration when making this decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions of staff, Councilor DeChano?
No, Mr.
Anybody else, questions of staff? Councilor DeChano, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much of the community is in,
Do you have a motion? Do you have a motion?
I do. No, I'm just forwarding staff recommendations.
Moving the staff recommendations, okay.
Moving staff recs to oppose this development at the OMB, at the new Alban.
I'm sorry.
At the OMB.
Oppose it.
Correct.
Okay.
All in favor?
You got the,
That's his job.
it's my job. You got that, Rosemary?
It's staff recs.
Okay. So Councilor DeChano's moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everybody. So, we'll go back to 4. Our first speaker, Barbie Lazarus. Barbie Lazarus? Oh, there she is.
Totally different.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the local council like a short presentation, and if we can make it short so we can get this off by lunch, everyone's been very patient here, so a couple minutes to, okay, so while we're setting up, it takes 2 minutes to set up. Councilor Doucette, you had 16? Guys, pay attention please here. 16, application for fence exemption, 23 Bradley Avenue. Are there any speakers on Bradley Avenue? 23 Bradley Avenue. Seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councilor Doucette.
So, Mr. Chair, I have to defer this once again till July
Okay.
because the owners have not sent transportation the documentation they need to look at the encroachment and to forward this to forestry, which was my motion last meeting.
Great. So moving to deferral next day. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Chan, you're going to stay here. Councilor Dunzia, can you deal with 17 quick? I gotta see if there's speakers, but can you deal with it quickly?
There's somebody here.
Oh, there are speakers. Okay, so we can't deal with that right now. I know, but I have to call for speakers. Do you need to speak? Yeah, then we can't, we'll have to hold that down then, okay? How about 18, 18 River Lee Drive, 18 River Lee Drive, you're here to speak, okay, we can't deal with that. Then that's all we can do right now. Okay. No, but there's speakers here, there's speakers here.
For Councilor Ford?
Yes, there's speakers here.
Oh, the speakers are here?
Okay, we're almost ready here.
So which one are you doing?
Doing a presentation here on 4. Lenka Holoback, Ms. Holoback, you still here? She spoke to both, so I think she's, yeah, okay. Taking her name off because she spoke to both, that's fine. Oh, she's still here? But she already said she spoke to 4, so. No, it's okay, I think, yeah. Ms. Hollebeck, you're not speaking to 4 again, you already spoke to it when you spoke to 5, correct? You're gonna speak to it again? Okay, thank you. Okay, here's our presentation, the floor is yours, thank you.
Okay, good morning, members of Community Council. My name is Elizabeth Silva Stewart, and I'm a planner with the City of Toronto, and I'm here today with my colleague Allison Reed, who is a senior urban designer, to present the final report on the High Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Character Study and the draft official plan amendment 419 and SASP 551 as part of the statutory public meeting required under the Planning Act. So last year, in April, Council directed staff to undertake an area character study for the High Park apartment neighborhood in accordance with the official plan policies, and come back to Community Council no later than the second quarter of 2018, right now, to present the findings of the study and present the anticipated site and area specific policy. The study area is generally bound by Line 2 Bloor Subway at the south, Glen Lake Avenue to the north, Mount View Avenue to the east, and Gothic Avenue to the west. It does not include properties fronting onto Bloor Street, as these properties were incorporated into the Bloor West Village Avenue study. The study area is approximately 19.6 hectares in area and is home to 8,500 people. There are 21 properties within the study area, one of which is a parkette, and another one is a future park at 21 High Park, and this particular property is the subject of one of the amendments in the official plan amendment before you today. This area is well served by transit. There's a bus running along High Park Avenue. The High Park subway station is at the base of the study area, and within close proximity there's Keele Street subway station. The study area is also near High Park to the south, Lithuania Park to the northeast. There's a community center and an elementary school directly east. So the purpose of the study was to evaluate the existing area characteristics and identify appropriate principles, policies, and guidelines to guide change and compatible infill development in the study area. The study outcomes are a natural heritage impact study addendum that was produced last month. The area character study, also completed last month, and I believe you all have a copy. This official plan amendment 419 and site and area specific policy 551 before you today. There will be draft area specific urban design guidelines, which will be online in mid-June for public consultation. And we also anticipate bringing forward a biodiverse landscape manual for the High Park area next year.
So as mentioned in the Bloor West Village Avenue study, you heard about the natural heritage impact study and water studies that were completed. So this study, we built upon those findings, and we conducted an addendum study to address the natural heritage impacts, in particular on the lands identified as provincial area of natural and scientific interest, environmentally sensitive areas, and other natural heritage system lands, mainly within High Park. The area character study, which we've provided you with a copy at the meeting today, is an extensive evaluation of this particular neighborhood. As you'll see from the 3D view at the bottom of the screen, it is an area that's characterized by tall buildings, apartment buildings, with generous open spaces around. So a very typical tower in the park type development we see in many parts of the city. But interestingly, it is laid onto a traditional neighborhood street grid There was actually a previous round of development here in the late 1800s and early 1900s with single-family homes, which were replaced in the mid-60s with the expansion of the subway system. So this area was developed to be transit supportive around the Keele and High Park subway station. There's a number of detailed findings. We did an extensive amount of geospatial analysis, three-dimensional modeling, as well as sun and shadow analysis. What I wanted to just draw your attention to, you'll notice in the policies that you are considering today, we speak about something called unencumbered soil areas. So you'll notice in the figure ground diagram that there are significant areas shaded in light gray, and those areas below the dark building footprints represent the extent of the underground parking structures within this neighborhood. So there are very few areas within this neighborhood that actually have unencumbered land. So a significant recommendation from the natural heritage study work, as well as the outcomes of our study findings, is to protect the areas of unencumbered soil to ensure long-term tree maturity as well as water infiltration, and to also provide opportunities for future public realm expansion, such as through parkland acquisition. I'm just very good to quickly go through the community consultation, which was very extensive. We had a consultation meeting which initiated the study in October of 2017. We asked the community to tell us about what they valued most, and we heard overwhelmingly about the open space between buildings, the green character, and the natural setting and trees. We also used a social pinpoint tool, which is an online tool that allows community members to place comments on a map, an interactive map, and tell us about these six topic areas and what they value about their community. We had over 251 responses. In March of this year, we had our second community consultation meeting where we provided draft guiding principles for the study and also had interactive workshops where members of the community were able to provide input about key open space routes and built form ideas. At that meeting, the community consultation meeting, we also invited our working group. We had a study working group made up of members of the community, as well as landowners and residents associations. We invited members from the working group to actually help facilitate our community meeting as a way to bring the group together and make those connections with the community. We had 6 meetings with our working group and really had an iterative process of developing the policies that are before you for consideration today.
Okay, so the draft SASP before you today is based on extensive community consultation and has been developed based on the findings of the character study. There are 3 main components to official plan amendment 419. The first one adds views to map 7A and schedule 4 in the official plan. The next one is a redesignation of 21 High Park from apartment neighborhoods, excuse me, from apartment neighborhoods to parks in the official plan. And then the third one, which is the meatiest part of the SASP, is or the meatiest part of the official plan amendment. It's the SASP 551, and that's the site and area specific section of the OPA. And it's going to be placed in the official plan to guide change and infill in the High Park apartment neighborhood into the future. So the SASP components begin, so the SASP 551 has several components, and the first one begins with a statement of area character, and this component basically summarizes the statement of area character, which is in the study, and sets the context for the policies in the SASP. High Park is an established, stable residential neighborhood with strong visual and physical connections to the natural environment. It's representative. It's a representative example of the Tower and the Park planning concept. and social interaction and sense of community is facilitated by the interconnected passive and active recreational space and amenities in this area, and an abundance of soft landscaped areas, open space areas. So future development and appropriate infill opportunities need to be sensitive to enhance the High Park apartment neighborhood area character. So from this ask, we proceed to identifying the goals for the policies, and these goals were developed from the guiding principles, and the guiding principles were the subject of extensive community consultation. The policies then are grouped into the various character-defining elements that were the subject of the study, and we started with the natural environment. The policies in the natural environment section of SAS 551 incorporate the recommendations of the Natural Heritage Impact Study and support and enhance the natural environment, including the natural heritage and hydrological features and functions of High Park. The public realm policies provide direction on how to expand and enhance the public realm within this neighborhood. The open space policies aim to preserve the park-like setting of the neighborhood, generous open space amenity and soft landscape areas that contribute to the character. The built form policies focus on specific infill development criteria tailored for the unique circumstances of this neighborhood. There are 3 building types identified as compatible with the character of the neighborhood: low-rise, High Park apartment neighborhood mid-rise, and High Park apartment neighborhood tall building. The low-rise is generally what is permitted in the broader neighborhood, while the mid-rise is an apartment building structure 11 stories tall, and it can either be in an elongated floor plate form or in a compact form. The tall building is a compact form and may be as tall as 81 meters, which is the height of the tallest building in this neighborhood, and it would be in a point tower form. Each of the building types come with specific development criteria, such as heights, floor plates, setbacks, and separation distances, and these are based on the detailed analysis of the study. And they all work together to maintain the character of the area. So in terms of the site servicing policies, those policies provide direction to consolidate and integrate these functions and improve infrastructure for the buildings. Transportation policies better integrate land use and transportation in this neighborhood. Community services and facilities policies provide direction on how to better accommodate community space in the area, including school facilities. And in terms of the implementation section, there is a section in there dealing with Section 37 benefits. These were identified through feedback taken from the community consultation that we conducted through the study. So in terms of the report recommendations before you today, the first recommendation is to adopt Official Plan Amendment 419. Next, authorize our city solicitor to make any stylistic changes that may be required. Next, direct further public consultation on our draft High Park Apartment Neighborhood Urban Design Guidelines, which will be posted online middle of the month. Next, direct staff to use OPA 419 and the SAS 551 in the evaluation of all new and current applications within this area. And then finally, to direct the city solicitor and city staff to attend and support Official Plan Amendment 419 if it's appealed. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go to our speakers list now. Our first speaker, Barbie Lazarus. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, hi. My name is Barbie Lazarus, and I'm a more than 10-year resident of the High Park Apartments community. I'm an active volunteer with the High Park Tenants Association, and I was on the previous working group for the development that is currently under construction on High Park right now. I want to start by saying I'm really excited about this official plan amendment, and I fully support that Community Council do adopt the amendment and forward it to City Council for approval. I have been told that at today's meeting there is an option for you to direct small changes to be made to this amendment and still send it to City Council for approval today. So that's what I'm urging you to do. Like I said, I'm really overwhelmingly in support of this amendment, especially the increased protections for preserving and enhancing open space amenities, preserving the soft landscaped areas, the pedestrian connections, the sunlight, the sky views, and the privacy. I really appreciate the really great job that's been done, especially on the built form section. I am, however, concerned just about two very small aspects of the recommended amendments. One is under number 3, public realm, and one is under section 8, community services. The one under section 3, it's letter L, VII, where it says the POPs or POPS will prioritize child-specific elements where appropriate. As you know, and it's been pointed out in earlier presentations, with High Park and Lithuania Park very directly nearby, we already have abundant, active, child-friendly green space available. We have several playgrounds, we have splash pads, we have tennis courts, we have an outdoor pool, we have a baseball diamond. So that space is already very abundant in the High Park apartment neighborhood, very close. What will be lost with the encroaching development, of course, is the passive, quiet green space. You know, a simple place where you can just sit on a park bench and read a book with some trees around. And so I would actually like to see the amendment emphasize that new green space acquired by the city and the POPs or POPS instead be prioritized as passive green spaces. So for example, instead of saying prioritize child-specific elements, I would like to see that adjusted to prioritize passive green space. And if you're not willing to make that change, perhaps you could just remove that small statement. I was also a little bit troubled to see under number 8, community services, letter B, that schools or community services may be located in standalone buildings or incorporated into new or even existing buildings. So I just wanted to point out and just remind people that these are residential apartments that we live in right now, and it's a residential apartment community. I know that I would be quite upset, to be honest, if a school or community center opened on the ground floor of my home, and I think that I think everyone here will agree that if these were not high rises, if this was a street of residential properties, of single family homes, there wouldn't be a recommendation to allow a community service, a daycare, or a school on the ground floor of those kinds of residential properties. So just because we're tenants and just because it's a high-rise residential building, I don't think it makes it any less our home or residential property. So in conclusion, again, I just want to emphasize I really am excited about the recommendations and the amendment as a whole. I do feel that these two small provisions that encourage daycare, schools, or community groups to use and encroach on the limited passive green space that we'll have left with the added developments are unnecessary. So I'd like to just see those two small statements removed. And I would like to see that the green space that will be left on the development properties be encouraged and protected wherever possible to be passive green space. So just again, in conclusion, as a longtime resident and active member of the community, I do urge you to direct these small changes to the official plan amendment, but then still do please send it to City Council for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lazarus. Councillor Campbell?
Good question. Sorry, what was the first item you referred to?
It is section 3 under letter L and then VII that POPs will prioritize child-specific elements where appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Van Dyke. That's why. Okay, my husband's Dutch.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, and congratulations to all of you for being here. Doesn't seem to be very many councillors, but I guess you've got a quorum. Oh, congratulations to all the councillors who've made it, as well as everyone else, and congratulations to the people who wrote that long report. I happen to have been reading a lot of reports at ontario.ca, and I know that you have so many reports already. So, Planning by Design on page 2009, Provincial Policy Statement, Land Use Planning 2014, Tall Building Design Guidelines 2013, Official Plan 2015, Growth Plan for the Golden Horseshoe, Vision 2017, the Planning Act, last modified 2018, and the High Park Neighbourhood Site and Area Specific Policy. So a lot of reports have been written, and how many of them have ever been read or listened to or followed? That's what I wonder, because I've been reading also an excellent report by Gladkey Planning Associates on Section 37. And I wish to talk now about transportation, transit, and air pollution. In your final page of the High Park Area Support, they mention the policies of Section 5.1.1 of the official plan regarding Section 37 of the Planning Act will apply to High Park apartment neighbourhood site and area-specific policy. I'd like to know if they could be allowed to apply with better accessibility to the High Park subway station. Right now, with 9,000 people living in the area, with hordes of people coming in from Kipling and Islington, I can't get a seat on the subway at 7 a.m. in the morning unless someone takes pity on this old lady, and then even at 1 o'clock on a Saturday. So I'd like to know how many councillors actually ever take the subway at the busy times. Good for you. Try it on a Saturday when you have a doors open policy, and try it at 7 a.m. in the morning to make your meetings on time. And make sure you get to Young and Bloor, because that's where the developers don't concern themselves with, but that's where urban planners do and take their numbers from. I also learned that the developers actually provided their own transit study for the High Park area. So why would anyone trust them? Oh, I mean, that just seemed to me a little unpertinent. Section 37 of the Planning Act authorizes municipalities to grant increases in height and density of development in exchange for provisions of facilities, service, or matters. Pretty vague. In High Park, we got a lot of stone dogs from the Daniels development, no access to the subway, no further green spaces, but we got some stone dogs. They may be coyotes, they may be wolves, but they're not there. And page 15 of the High Park study says, a detailed analysis of future transit riders. We already have 9,000 people in a heavily saturated community. So what would a detailed study of future transit riders show if they haven't really looked at the situation right now? Mr. Holliday probably knows. I hope all the rest of you will discover what it's like to take the subway to a meeting downtown when you have to go through Young and Bloor. So more accessibility is needed. I'm disabled. I have an aging husband with heart problems. I don't like going downstairs. He doesn't like going upstairs. So it's Jack Spratt. There is no down escalator. Do you know what it's like to stand at the top of a flight of stone stairs, wondering if you're going to fall and crash and break all your hips and ribs and lie bleeding at the bottom because there's no other way of getting downstairs? Imagine if you have a stroller. No escalators. Why is Section 37 not sent for providing elevators? Since amalgamation, the city has secured $309 million in Section 37 cash benefits and received $212 million in payments and accrued interest, as well as significant additional unquantified in-kind benefits that may exceed the value of cash contributions. The funds that are provided through Section 37 agreements represent only a small fraction
Your
of the
time's
total
up. Can you wrap up,
revenue.
please? Your time's
Sorry.
up. Thank you.
So with all that money, please give us an elevator at the High Park subway. Thank you.
Thank you. sorry, Ms. Fett, you had a question? Sorry, you have a question?
It's just a quick question as a matter of information. As a counselor who takes the subway and who's actually a TTC commissioner, are you aware that all 69 stations will be fully accessible by 2022, I think it is? So there will be an elevator and there will be an escalator.
Yes. Are you sure they have elevators as well as downward escalators?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know elevators for sure.
Well, what happened to that 309 million?
It just disappeared into thin air, I'm afraid.
Obviously. I wonder if people got cases of wine at Christmas.
We're trying to get this done before lunch. We got 5 speakers and 20 minutes to go. So our next speaker, Mary Coricia. Hi, Mary. Here. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. Guys, we're trying to get through this before lunch. We're very tight here. Guys, please. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Members of the Etobicoke York Community Council, my name is Mary Koritza, and I'm a 4-year resident of the High Park North neighborhood, as well as a member of the High Park Community Alliance. My partner and I rent an apartment in one of the high-rises on Pacific Avenue, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this amendment, which recognizes the High Park North apartment neighborhood as a special area within the City of Toronto, with unique and valuable characteristics worth preserving. There are other residents who would have liked to communicate to you directly their own opinions on the amendment, but were not able to attend, and I know because I've spoken with some of them. I've canvassed as many of my apartment building neighbors as possible to ask what they would like communicated today, in addition to whatever emails they may send. So first I'll speak about my own experience of the little corner in Toronto where I live, and I'm starting a family, and then I'll talk about what this amendment means to me, and then I'll pass along some of the things my neighbors said I should tell you. When I moved back to Toronto a few years ago, I specifically looked for an apartment somewhere with tree-lined streets. For me, like for many people, living near trees is a big factor in quality of life, but you don't need my subjective experience to know the value of trees in an urban setting for both humans and the environment. There is plenty of evidence-based research, and the City of Toronto even has an official strategy to grow Toronto parkland, which includes privately owned, publicly accessible lands, like in High Park North. No, my point is that in Toronto, if you're looking for tree-lined streets, you probably can't do better than High Park North. It's not a matter of one row of trees lining the street. There's rows upon rows, all different varieties, all different sizes, spaced in a random way that gives the sense of being in a park. When anyone walks on the streets or between the buildings in High Park North, they feel more in a natural environment than really a man-made one. How clever, how careful, how creative the designers were. How lucky we are who get to rent in the neighborhood, or just take strolls through it, or even just have this model of enlightened urban residential planning existing in our city. How much a shame, then, to find out about 2 development proposals that would tear down much of what is so great in the neighborhood. Those development proposals are the reason many of us residents mobilized, fundraised, canvassed, and advocated. It's why Councillor Sarah Doucette has so energetically supported us, and why it is so important that city staff invested hundreds of hours of staff time and expertise leading to this amendment. So when the amendment talks about reclassifying our neighborhood to parks and open spaces, I hope of continuing to see kids, including my future child, running, jumping, and playing frisbee between our apartment buildings. When the amendment talks about mandating unencumbered soil areas, I have hope of keeping many of those massive trees because there won't be an underground parking garage clipping their roots. And when the amendment talks about limited overlook and providing access to natural light, I can hope that we won't go from living in towers in the park this year to a few years later living in another version of Liberty Village or Yonge and Eglinton. That's what I think, but what do my neighbors say? Gail, on the 17th floor, visits her friends on Quebec Avenue, where 2 apartment buildings under construction have already obstructed the view, eliminated space between buildings, and uprooted trees. She worries that she faces the same thing. Annie, an older lady on the 16th floor, wants to maintain the demographic mix by limiting density and preserving relative privacy so that retirees can continue to feel comfortable there too. And Shondell, a young lady on the 3rd floor, said, "I'm from the Caribbean. Nature is what drives me. I work downtown, but I don't want to live like downtown. I used to live right on Dundas West, she said. I moved here for the green space, the airiness. I should mention before concluding that residents adamant about preserving the special features of High Park North also often volunteered that they support filling the need for rental housing in the city. Like me, they just don't see why we have to destroy something good to do that. Surely this amendment shows that we in Toronto have enough vision and resourcefulness to come up with solutions that protect our social and natural riches at the same time as growing the city. That's what many residents of High Park North say, and today with your votes, we wait to hear what you, respected councillors, have to say as well. And before I leave, I just want to add that with all very great respect to my colleague and fellow resident Barbie, I would respectfully disagree, and I do believe that there is a bit of a need for a little bit more child-friendly infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Questions? Next speaker, Lenka Holovic. 2 seconds over, that was awesome. Welcome back. How are you? 5 minutes.
My name is Lenka Halubek. Dear councillors, I appreciate this opportunity to address proposed amendment number 419 and cite an area-specific policy number 511 in respect to High Park Apartment Neighborhood Study and the final report. As a participant of both Blue West Village Avenue Study, LAC, and High Park Apartment Neighborhood Character Study Working Group, I am very aware of an enormous amount of efforts invested into these secondary studies by the city staff. Thank you. It doesn't mean necessarily that I always agree, but I am very aware how hard you worked. The outcome of these studies, especially High Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Character Study and the proposed draft official plan amendment number 419 and SASC policy number 5Y1 is critical for future preservation of High Park natural heritage system for the long term. As Provincial Policy Statement 2014 says, natural heritage shall be preserved for the long term. So this is now in jeopardy. Today, it seems that there is a notoriety about High Park, a knowledge about High Park being one of the most significant natural resources in Toronto and a citywide natural heritage destination and wildlife habitat. Yet, when it comes to development, in some of the city's most attractive areas, in proximity to some of the city's most valuable, fragile, unique natural heritage and remaining biodiversity hotspots. We will hear much more about this coming July, because the biodiversity strategy finally is coming back. So when it comes to developing in those very attractive areas, we somewhat make ourselves believe that we can have it all without paying for the consequences. We can develop and we can still protect the natural heritage at the same time. So it's something a little bit of science fiction. Yet the proposed amendment number 419 stipulates density increase in High Park natural heritage immediate proximity as an addition of approximately 3% of gross floor area and accompanying population density spread across the entire High Park apartment neighborhood, which can be translated into potentially about 3,000 new residents in the study area. Now, if we didn't have already dense population, high density in High Park apartment neighborhood character area, our density now, according to 2016 census information, is 8,500. In mid-2019, when two 25 stories condominium towers, 51 Quebec Avenue, will be completed, we will be adding another perhaps close to 1,000 residents. So our population will increase to 9,500, and it will come to about 500 people per hectare then. If we add another 3,000, potentially, we may end up with 12,000, and then per hectare population will be what is now in downtown. Are we still believing that the impact due to this increased use of the local residents will not may impact on this precious natural heritage, despite potential increase of best management practices and substantial funding from the city for that increase of management? To be continued. High Park was considered being one of the most significant natural heritage destinations from the onset of ecosystem approach concept developed in Toronto in the early 90s. So according to the Metropolitan Waterfront Plan prepared by Metropolitan Planning Department in 1994, this destination was not planned with all those subway stations as transit, but had so many subway stations because it was to be used as prime recreation resorts in the city.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Lowe's? Paul Lowe's? Got 3 speakers left and 6 minutes to go. See if we can get this done before lunch. Okay, Paul, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Paul Lowe's. I'm with the planning firm of SGL Planning and Design, and we represent 299 Glen Lake Limited, which of course are the owners of 299 Glen Lake, which is a 30-story rental building at the corner of Pacific and Glen Lake Avenue. We've submitted a letter to Community Council. You should have it before you. We've been involved with the area character study, and I've sat on the working group, and we'd like to commend staff for the great work they've done. They've done a heck of a lot of work in a very short period of time, so I urge you, Community Council, to also commend them for the great work that they've done. We're generally quite supportive of the work that's done and supportive of OPA 419. We do have 4 specific policy comments to make and request specific policy changes. The first one is regarding building separation distances, which you'll find in Section 5. Typically, building separation distances are required to ensure privacy between units, between windows and balconies facing each other. And we support that as a typical standard in the City of Toronto. But the way the policy is written, it would apply between a blank wall and a building with windows and doors, windows and balconies, and we don't think that's necessary. That can be addressed through the zoning bylaw. This is at the official plan stage, so we'd request that the policy be changed to minimum separation distance between 2 primary elevations of new and existing windows. So primary elevations are where you have windows and balconies. Our second comment is regarding unencumbered soils. We support that principle of trying to protect and keep the unencumbered soils, but the policy is worded, it says maintain unencumbered soil areas to provide for water infiltration. We're concerned about the interpretation of maintain. It may be interpreted that there's no change that's allowed to underground parking garages. We think there should be some flexibility there, so we're suggesting the policy be changed from maintain to provide unencumbered soils for water infiltration. We do support the concept of trying to maximize water infiltration. Our third comment is related. There's requirements for specific setbacks to underground parking garage from the street, again for underground, for the unencumbered soils. We're concerned that when we come forward that there needs to be a balance between what your transportation department's going to require in terms of parking requirements and then water infiltration, and we think that that needs to be considered as applications come forward. So we'd request that the specific numbers, the policies are appropriate, but the specific numbers not be included in the official plan, but addressed at the zoning bylaw. Lastly, we have a policy requiring 25% of new units to be 2-bedroom and 10% to be 3-bedroom. We support that concept, but the way it's written is to apply to all new units. 299 Glen Lake has a substantial number of 2- and 3-bedroom units, and we'd like those taken into account. So we suggest the policy be changed to, rather than all new dwelling units, to all dwelling units on a site. So 25% 2-bedroom, 10% 3-bedroom of all units on a site. I'd urge you to take into account those suggested amendments, and thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I was hoping to get this done by lunch, but we just had 4 people just add to the list to speak, so there's now 6 more, so we're not gonna get done by lunch. So we're gonna recess till 1:30 for lunch. Recess.